This week, it is Valentine's Day, so there's love associated with the day. There is love in the air, and someone with love in his name, Harry Sverdlove, is here with us in studio. He's the Chief Technology Officer at Edgewise. He'll be here for an interview to talk about the future of firewalls. In our technical segment, I will launch the first part in a several-part series on enterprise-ish network security hardware and software that we've incorporated here at Security Weekly, along with some other sites with some testing. So we'll talk about the first parts, which are the hardware and the software that we're working with. In the security news, why it's way too easy to sell counterfeit goods on Amazon, how to defend against the Run-C container vulnerability, creating a dream team for your new age cybersecurity team, how you can get a Windows 95 emulator for Windows 10, Linux or Mac. DEF CON goes to Washington. There are podcasts that can take your computer skills to the next level. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicating. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero-trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/securityweekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today.
And welcome to the show. And on this Valentine's Day, let me introduce you to a man that we love to love, especially on Thanksgiving, Mr. Paul Asadoria.
Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly. This is episode 594, recorded on February 14th, in case you hadn't guessed that already, 2019, in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, Mr. Larry Pesce.
Yay,
you're back again. You're back.
I know. It's crazy. And it was 3 weeks with the kids because my wife was away and babysitter and that stuff. And then I had a management meeting in Seattle last week. And
is that what you call hanging out with Mike Poor making knives?
That was afterwards. We had last week was management meeting, and then the weekend, and then this week was hanging out making knives.
I see.
And
so when Mike picks you up from the airport, that's when you have your meeting, and then the rest of the time is knife making. Is that what I heard?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. and I had the red eye home last night, so I got in at 1 o'clock today, and now here I am.
Well, welcome back, Larry.
Woohoo.
Nice to have you back in studio.
Yes.
Harry Sverdlove is here in studio with Limoncello. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for having me. It's
you've shared with me your homemade limoncello.
It is, and I got to give credit to my wife. She makes the limoncello.
Okay.
And this is my gift to you instead of roses.
Oh, that's
a beautiful day.
That's very nice. I'd much prefer alcohol, alcoholic beverages to flowers.
I would have brought some homemade knives, but apparently I don't know how to make knives.
Well, yeah, I know a guy, a couple of guys, actually.
A couple guys.
So how do you make limoncello?
It's actually this is the creamy limoncello, not that other crap. So you take.
I thought you were going to say, I don't know, my wife makes it, like that's her thing, which would be totally fair.
No, you take grain alcohol, which you can't get in Massachusetts. You got to go to Connecticut.
Yeah.
And you put lemon zest in it, and you let it soak for 3 weeks. And then you take milk, and you boil it, and I don't know, it's some sort of separation thing.
Sure.
And so you scoop out the goopy stuff on top, and you do this 3 times, and then you take the milk and the alcohol, the grain alcohol, and you pour it all together, and you mix it in some cool folding process, and then you cheesecloth strain it 3 different times.
Wow.
To get all the goopy stuff out, and then you drink it cold.
That's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
very cold, right? It's
Right.
freezer. The
Right.
glasses are. It's like a martini.
Exactly.
Vodka has to be frozen. Glasses have to be frozen.
And what I didn't tell you now, it tastes like, a sorbet or something like
It's
that.
delicious.
It's pure grain alcohol, so just be
This
careful.
is going to be an interesting show. We're going to switch to wine after this, so I don't fall off my chair. Also,
one might argue you're whining already.
yes, I've been known to do that. Mr. Patrick Laverty is here in studio. Patrick, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul. I definitely love being here on Valentine's Day. And I thought we discussed the way that you're supposed to be drinking. That is always
Oh, pinkies
out.
Pinky out.
Yeah, we got to have the pinky out.
Pinky's out.
Yeah, the subtitle for this episode should
Have
be
a couple of them,
and our
there'll be
wives are
something
pissed.
else
Yeah.
out.
Yes, actually, my wife was working today too, so we were like, "Hey, it's Valentine's Day. Going to work? Me too. Okay, see you tomorrow." It's it happens that way. It's
Yep.
all good. It's all good. We get all weekend to celebrate Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah.
Romantic dinners and stuff, totally overrated.
Overrated. So unless you've been to some of our Security Weekly dinners, we'll invite you next time. Mr. Jeff Mann is on the lines remotely. Mr. Jeff Mann, how are you?
Doing well, Paul. We love you. We love working on Valentine's Day, even though my wife's not too crazy about it. And the goopy stuff in the lemonade process, curds, and what's
Curds.
left over is whey.
Oh, just like the
The Mary Tuffet woman.
Yeah.
No way.
It's like how you make cheese, only you keep the goopy stuff and you throw out the liquid. So I'm glad to hear that, if you were being really resourceful, you'd keep the goopy stuff and make cheese, and the leftover you make this delicious beverage that I'm jealous that I don't get to try. But I've got my bottle of Lagavulin 16,
Ooh,
so
that-
I'm
nice
I'm
choice.
hanging out.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mr. Joff Thayer is on the lines remotely as well. Joff, welcome to the program.
Yeah, here I am. My electrons in the flesh. So I got way ahead of you guys. I actually took my wife out last night. See,
Good
very
job.
smart.
Good job, Joff. That's why that's why you're Joff. Always
Yep.
the romantic.
And that's okay,
Always
Joff.
thinking of the romance.
Because Joff, I took your wife out for lunch.
Wow.
Wow.
It was Burger King, but
Hey,
That's nothing compared to what my brother did to your wife.
Wow. We'll let that roasting smell, that burning smell clear. Wow. And while it's doing that, the RSA Conference 2019 is coming up March 4th through the 8th. RSAconference.com/Security Weekly-US19. Register using the discount code 5U9SWFD. Get $100 off. If you'd like to do a briefing with us or a paid interview or both, go to securityweekly.com/conference request. You can do that for all of the conferences that we've set up so far, RSA and InfoSec World. Let's see. Harry is here with us. You are the CTO and founder, correct?
I am the CTO and co-founder.
Co-founder. And previously you were at Carbon Black,
I
correct?
was the CTO for Carbon Black for 8.5 years.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
And now you're here tonight on Paul Security Weekly, hanging with us. And I wanted to just set up, I think, what we're primarily going to be talking about tonight. And it stems from an earlier conversation I had today. And I said, when I was thinking about this problem of application separation and how we're not really doing so much firewalling now for our applications, that it's totally different. It's DevOps, it's containers, it's serverless. And when I was doing firewalling at the university, and Joff were just having we're having a network nerd moment before the show, but I would get applications, whether they were locally written, installed, or purchased from a vendor. They'd show up on the network, and I would ask the developers, the creators of the software, the vendor, I'd say, hey, which firewall ports do you need open for that application? And most of the time it was blank stares, questions, or the answer of like, well, just all of them? Oh, so you're using all of the ports and protocols. That's awesome. And so what scares me is that in today's world, we're providing that level of separation. And I'm not there to ask the questions oftentimes. And if someone is asking the questions, who's got the answers?
Right. I mean, you've got definitely a number of problems. The first is the language is totally different. Exactly what you said. So you're in a containerized environment. You've got Kubernetes. You've got pods going everywhere. What ports are you opening?
Right.
What addresses? And so the network operator and the application developer and the DevOps, they don't speak the same language. So that's
Right.
part of the reason to look at network security differently is to say, well, wait a second, let's stop saying that. Let's say, I've got an application, here's its identity, and there's what it has to talk to. The other
Right.
problem is, so let's say somebody said to you, okay, I need you to open up port 22. So you open up port 22, but from where to where? Typically, they'll say, well, it's going to be somewhere over here. So you set up a subnet there and a subnet there. You basically end up with close to an any to any as you get. And then all of a sudden, what happens if a different application comes along and uses the same port? Or that application comes along and starts doing funky things. You have no real control over. You're basically putting security on the highway when you're trying to secure the car.
Right. Yeah. There's multiple there's multiple layers in networking, right? But when we think about the physical layer and then the virtual layer, but even on top of the virtual layer, there's the container layer that has its own networking that you have to define. So it's almost like we have to do this
and it's getting more and
times.
more complex. And the whole point of a network is to work, is to facilitate communication. The whole point of security is to restrict communication. So you set up your network, and essentially that's why we talk about this idea of overexposure. You allow everything because it's too complicated to try and micromanage, and what you've done instead is you've introduced more risk.
Right. And God forbid we have to respond to a security incident or troubleshoot a problem in today's world when it comes down to communications. Because some of the ways we'll think of it is, well, okay, there's one application, it's a few containers, and we're deploying it, and now we've got multiple environments. That's complicated in and of itself. Organizations have progressed to the point today where there's tens and tens of thousands of applications. Never mind the environments for those specific applications, that each application has multiple containers and multiple environments. So this quickly can spiral. How are people doing this today, Harry? Going back to my example of asking the app developer what ports do you need open, fast forwarding to today where there's 10,000 containers running and they all have to have some type of controls around them.
Well, show me a security analyst that doesn't look burnt out.
Yeah,
and
right.
And you start to get the answer. So they've got tens of thousands, or at least hundreds, if not thousands, of applications running on ephemeral ports, running on elastic environments. So you've got terabytes of IP data going every day, and now there's an incident. And so you're sitting there trying to connect dots from one medium to another, going from terabytes to hundreds of thousands, all because you need to figure out, well, which system was breached, what application was doing what, where was it talking, and the answer is, it's really hard. If you talk to a lot of the FUD today, the answer is, well, it's going to be solved by artificial intelligence in the cloud. But until that happens, it's actually a struggle. It's a huge problem, and you're basically looking at the wrong data to try and solve the problem. And that's one of the reasons why I founded Edgewise, which was to try and get the problem, or at least the data that we collect, closer to what it is we're trying to protect.
Yeah, because it's no longer about, an application doesn't really live on one physical system that we racked in the data center. Like when we were at Brown, Patrick, right? We'd rack a server in the data center, we'd put an operating system on it, we'd put Apache on it, PHP, whatever, and we'd put an app on it, and then we'd go do security.
We'd put all the apps on it.
We put all the apps on it, yes. But today it's just so different.
No, now it appears over there, and then, it's high load, so 10 of them appear over there.
Yes,
and then we pop up 10 more systems over there. The app is moving, but the identity of the app isn't moving. The IP addresses, the layer 3 that we're trying to create firewalls for, they're constantly either changing or we're going to wildcard them. And so the form factor has basically changed. And then, of course, you have the challenge that, well, if you're really in a cloud, you're not using hardware. You're not plugging into a tap. You're not tapping into a switch somewhere. So you're ending up rerouting all this traffic somewhere else so that you can do deep packet inspection and try and figure stuff out.
Try and make decisions. But if everything's changing that you're trying to protect, how do you?
You don't.
We can't protect it with a traditional firewall. That's why I think even the term application firewall is not. It's not appropriate anymore. I feel like we need a different term to describe what we're talking about.
Which is why I'm not in marketing, although everybody is a CMO. If you drink enough alcohol, at least. So
that's a fantastic quote.
A couple more of these, I'll be the CMO. But what do we call this? Is application? We have application aware firewalls. We have application segmentation.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we talk about layer 8 or layer 9 if you want to use sort of layer terminology.
We call layer 8 the human element.
Oh yeah, we love layer 8.
That's the name of the conference that Patrick runs here in Rhode Island. It's called Layer 8.
You have a conference called Layer 8?
Yeah, Layer 8 conference, all about social engineering and OSINT, yeah.
So Layer 8's the human on top of that?
Exactly.
Yes.
So then I would be Layer 11 because my
Right.
dial goes.
Yes, yeah.
Goes to 11.
My dial goes to 11. So we do a Layer 11.
Mm-hmm.
We need to think about things differently. And I coming from the carbon black days, if you will, where we needed to start thinking about antivirus differently. There's got to be a better way instead of just constantly doing malware signatures to find out things bad. How do we
Playing whack-a-mole.
playing whack-a-mole? How do we do that differently? And it took 25 years for the industry to start saying, antivirus is okay, but it's not really solving my problem. It's been 30 years that the base technology, which is basically packet inspection, IP, port protocol, maybe the first 4 packets you do some inspection on. We've been doing that now for 30 years. And how much has changed in 30 years? There was no cloud then. There was no IoT. There was no BYOD. There was no elasticity. And yet the form factor and the technologies we've been using haven't changed as much. And so there needs to be better words. And maybe in a couple more limoncellos, I'll actually know the exact word to tell you. It'll be magical.
It's going to be, I can't wait.
It's going to be the best word
Go ahead,
ever.
Joff.
Yeah, I have a question. Actually, it's interesting today. I was doing a little bit of reading on the evolution of networking, in particular as it applies to the security context. And somewhere around about 2011, 2012, software-defined networking started to take hold, where they're separating the control plane away from the data plane, and yielding abilities to start moving the enforcement point in the security context much closer to the application. And I'm wondering how you feel in the world of open flow and software-defined networking. It's already entered the world of operating system virtualization. Do you think software-defined networking is going to migrate further up the stack into the containerized world as well? And do you think there's a play there?
Yeah, well, I do think, it already is doing that with different software-defined mesh networks, and others are moving deeper or higher up the stack, if you will. The software-defined networking still, though, as a solution or as a framework, is all about the facilitation. It's about enabling communication. It really is more about how do I make sure that everything can reach everything that I need in this virtualized elastic world. And so I do think that one of the challenges is it's not a security solution. In fact, it's an insecurity solution, but it's a necessary thing in a virtualized network. I
feel like there's an application there, though, because one of the traditional problems that we had in communication security, if you go back to the baseline, we're talking 20 years ago, is, there was a box, a brick or whatever, and it had plumbing in and plumbing out. And, that was our enforcement point. Whereas, it's my belief that software-defined networking, with the appropriate control plane facilitation, allows you to move that enforcement point much closer to the actual application. And so there is definitely a security context there that perhaps just hasn't been explored yet.
Yeah, no, I do think the control plane has to move closer. The question is it going to be at a point in time, even on a virtualized network, or are you moving the control plane actually into the application or into the container, moving it as close as possible to the thing making the communication? The closer you get to that asset, the more secure your communications or the more powerful your control plane becomes, as opposed to a point in time where we've learned it's okay, but it's kind of like what are those turnstiles that you see in subways or something? It's a point in time where something has to cross through, and there'll always be ways to either spoof that, and or if you basically bypass the control plane, which happens, then you've basically jumped the turnstile. So I do think that software-defined networking, if it's and as it gets closer and closer to the container, to the actual, not just the container, but the process within the container, the service within the container that's actually doing the communication, that's where you're going to really start getting the kind of power that you need to get.
Yeah, I think that's right. I see an opportunity as I was doing my reading today that, if you can get an integration of the software-defined networking control plane APIs that are able to actually reach into the virtualized infrastructure at all layers, both the operating system virtualization, but then further up the stack into the actual application virtualization, as well as reaching across cloud and on-prem, then suddenly we're back in the ball game where no longer do we have these physically plumbed devices. We've actually abstracted our control plane completely out of the physical device and turned that into an API that can control in an agnostic way across the entire infrastructure. And I think that's the golden thing we're all ultimately after, that hasn't happened yet, to transform the paradigm from 10, 20 years back up until now. Right now, I think we're flailing around with a lack of ability to actually get right up close to that application. And the vendors just haven't caught up yet.
Right. No, I think there's no question. If you think, what are they able to do today? They're able to get down to, layer 7, because I guess layer 8 has been hijacked by humans. But if you get to layer 7, so the best they can do is say, okay, I can't get to you. I can't get to your identity, but I'm going to look at some of the packets and what you're communicating, and I'm going to try and divine things. I'm going to try and divine that this is the user token you're using. Or, hey, you look like SQL to me, so I think you're, SQL Server, or I think you're a certain application based on some signature, and it's a little bit of reading tea leaves. It's faking getting closer to the application. It's not actually what is the identity of the thing you're trying to control.
Right, and I think the other issue is that what we're seeing is primarily a sort of a fallback to the north-south traffic, to put it in actual communications terms, and we're losing the east-west visibility. Because if the east-west traffic is all sitting in the virtualized container environment, then there's a lot of flows going on from a pure on-the-wire thing that are just occurring in software that nobody can see anymore, and nobody has visibility into it. And until we actually get the APIs to actually have software switching and software firewalling distributed out, or software IPS distributed out into those flows, we're never going to have that visibility. But I do see that there is a potential future there with protocols such as OpenFlow. It's sort of convenient that I was reading about that today, because it kind of plays into this whole discussion.
Yeah, I think some of the software-defined networking that I've seen in the new ways we do VPNs are really wrong, in that we're taking everyone's traffic and we're funneling it through a virtual software-defined network that's then trusted by this other software-defined network. And in order to access it, all your traffic has to go up into this virtual network. That's the wrong. It's not close enough to the application.
Right,
as
exactly.
we're discussing.
We're actually, in many senses, you're moving the control plane further away to another virtualized location that somebody else has to deal with. That's as in virtual distances, virtually kilometers away from where you need to be.
I'm sorry, that's the key selling point, though, I think, is the quote-unquote somebody else has to deal with it, perceived or otherwise.
What you actually need, though, is distributed, consistent policy, no matter what the ingress point of the traffic is, ultimately. Right. And that's where, protocols such as OpenFlow and its ilk, if the data plane side of that is actually defined well to accept that management protocol communication and pushed right up to the edge of the app, you can then go back to a world where you have consistent policy deployed in a distributed manner, which is really the nirvana we're all after, because we've lost the ability to control those choke points. It just doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Like Paul was just saying, that the whole idea of like steering everybody through one funnel is just long gone. From a user application perspective, it's just not feasible anymore.
Although it's making a comeback in software-defined perimeters.
It is, yes, yes. Well, yes. And I can't remember the vendors' names that do that off the top of my head, but there's a whole space.
There's a whole space
that's
on
doing
that, and it really is about, they call it VPN-less, but essentially it's a reverse proxy. Yeah. And it's steering everybody to one place, make a decision, and then rerouting them to someplace else.
Yes, yes.
It does beg the question, though, should we I sort of started this off in the world of communication security, and as you start looking at the traditional layer 3, layer 4 stuff, essentially that has become useless as enforcement points anyway, and we all know that. But inspection at the application layer is not useless as a potential enforcement point. So I still think we do need the ability to distribute that perimeter out, and we need the intelligence to do the application layer inspection to actually be able to write that policy rule down to that distributed perimeter. And I think that's the piece we're missing.
Yeah. And well, that is, in fact, as a concept and the idea of distributing down to the layer of the application, right, close as possible as we can get, and establishing provenance and trust on that application. That is what Edgewise, that's the whole purpose of the technology that we've designed and built, which is to get us closer to that stage where your distributed policies are pushed out and decision points are made as close as possible to the thing, let's just say, that whose communication you're trying to ascertain or control.
Sorry,
Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Please. Are you looking? Are you considering the software-defined networking world, or are you steering away from that right now?
We're definitely considering it. We're not steering away from that. For us right now, that's an enablement platform in which we can utilize. But right now, our goal is we sit basically between the operating system and the application layer, whether it's inside of a container or not, and using that as a basis to ascertain who's making the connection, what's the identity, the routing path it might take afterwards. We're less interested in, and part of the point, I think, of where we're going is the route doesn't matter as much. You guys were talking before about lag and other things. There's a lot of routing involved. It doesn't matter. What matters is the source and the destination. Are these two things authorized to communicate? If it's going to get fail over to a different server or to a cluster or split between two things, who cares if it's talking to the right thing?
Yep.
And so so for us, software-defined networking is an enabling technology.
Which instance of the app and its IP address doesn't
matter at all.
It's the app,
right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the point of having something more maintainable, which is you create a policy, and that policy, however you describe it, and it's not described that has to be retranslated. This application can talk to this database. That's the policy. If the database moves to Hong Kong, well, maybe not. Bad example.
Maybe not China.
Maybe not China. All right, well, forget China. But if it moves someplace else, maybe from U.S. East to U.S. West, how about that?
Sure.
That's fine. It doesn't matter as long as it's still the identity. Now, if it's compromised and it's somebody pretending to be the database, but it's not, now you have a problem.
Google and Wendy Nather from Duo was on the show last year, I believe, or the year before, but she was talking about Google's initiative for it. Did they call it Zero? What did they call that?
Beyond Corp.
Beyond Corp.
Yeah, they actually call it Beyond Corp. That's their Zero Trust initiative.
Yeah.
And it's primarily focused, by the way, it is more SDP. It's focused from
the user perspective.
From the user perspective.
Not the application perspective. But it's a similar concept in that.
Absolutely.
They don't care where I am, right? Maybe what device I'm using, they care a little bit about if it's vulnerable, but they care about who I am. Can I prove who I am, and associating it with a role in the application.
Right. I think the key points and it applies whether you're doing inside out, which is your east-west traffic, or outside in your north-south traffic, is first they need to ascertain identity. How do I trust who you are?
Right.
And then they don't make the decision at a point in time. They make the decision continuously based on your environment. So who you are, well, most of us understand multi-factor. Maybe I use a key fob, or I use some method to
I proved that I'm Paul.
You proved that you're Paul. At least we think you are.
Sure.
We're on the fence on this. And then we say, well, okay, you know what? If you are in China, you're still Paul, but you don't get access to our source code.
Yeah.
But you're now in the United States. Now you do get access. Or hey, there's something else happening in one of the examples that happens with Beyond Corp. You're on a mobile device, but it's unpatched. Your identity is ascertained, but your environment is determined to be questionable, so we're going to limit your access. So the principle there is, first you have to ascertain identity, and the second is you have to, with each request, ascertain trustworthiness, not just of who you are, but where you are. And that's the principle behind Zero Trust, which is there's this whole idea, never trust, always verify, as opposed to trust but verify.
And that's similar to what you're implementing.
It's exactly the same.
Okay.
It's exactly the same for non-users. So imagine you're not a user, you're a data center, your databases, your app servers. There's no human there to sit there with a key fob or to punch in multi-factor. So what is the other factor? Well, if you have one application talking to another, they've already got one factor, which is something they know, the password. They know I know the password to the database, but what about who they are? That's where identity comes from. And so for what we do is we take cryptographic signatures, we take hashes, we look at loaded modules, we look at even the BIOS ID, the state of the system, and we say, we know who you are and we know what state of your environment it is. now we can make a decision. We have multi-factor now. We have two things. You know something. We know who you are. Multi-factor for basically non-interactive sessions.
And do you constantly validate that behavior? In other words, like you've got two applications talking to each other, and they're doing okay stuff, and you're like, yeah, this is allowed. But now, Larry or Patrick or Joff comes along, and they're manipulating those requests in some way. Does that change the trust model without actually detecting the attack? Does that change the trust model?
Definitely. And it really does. Part of that depends on, and this is how the technology evolves, what do you define as identity? So, for example, certainly if you change the bits, if Larry comes along and decides, I'm going to change one of the loaded modules, I'm going to inject something into that process, you've changed the memory footprint, you've changed the binary or the executable, you've changed the identity. It's no longer trustworthy. But what if you just start using it in a funky way? So it depends on if we start defining usage as identity. Well, now identity is pretty volatile. So the short answer is it's a balance.
Right, I got you.
And it depends on the environment. Some environments you want to be much more strict and say, look, any perturbation in pattern or in behavior, or if it starts, maybe you start making 10 database connections at a time instead of 3, well, that might be something that would lower my trust. And you might decide that that's something I want to consider. Or you might say, you know what, I want it to be a more liberal environment. I want it to ascertain trust, but I want to have some boundaries because things change. I have an application that behaves very differently, or some days Larry decides, he's going to go crazy.
You're weighting all of this behavior in telemetry that you're collecting.
And
obviously using the industry buzz terms, machine learning and AI, but you're weighting all this stuff. And does the user have some influence on those weights or how they're treated? Or
they absolutely do. Well, and as it's we just got, it's a novel technology. It's a different way of doing control plane. I'm happy that just actually we got last December or November a patent awarded for the way that we're doing our control plane.
Nice, congrats.
Which is
That's
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, it took years at previous employers
patents.
to do that. And this one took only 18 months.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, it was actually. I'm learning how to speak patentese, which I definitely can't do with limoncello. it's a lot of pluperfect nonsense.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But and part of that is there's identity, there's environment, and then and the two together, you can use that to weight risk. It's for now, we're giving the user control over what is their risk tolerance for change of identity and for things. This is where machine learning comes into play, though, is we can see, for example, watching an application run for just 48 hours, you can start seeing, hey, this is its behavior. This is its identity, its behavior. And by the way, it actually changes certain attributes about itself over time. And we're noticing that so we can adapt automatically. But for now, we also want to give the user control because it's, every environment is different. And if we come along, if I would come to you and say, look, I built an AI, it's sentient, it's Skynet, and you don't have to interact at all because it will always do the right thing. I probably won't be here. I'd be on a yacht somewhere.
Right? Yeah, right. If you could automate that entirely. It sounds like user behavior analytics, but UBA is after the fact, right?
Yeah, and it is, when I look at it, in part of my background, I wasn't just CTO at an endpoint security product, but I was also CISO for a while, and I've dealt with a lot of war rooms and a lot of security teams. And this whole idea of net flow analysis, modeling of net flow analysis is nothing short of a nightmare. And especially in a virtualized world, modeling of application flow, which is just people talking to each other. So, for example, imagine if I had to get all of our phone, network, email records and try to match them up just based on all the ways we communicate, it would be a nightmare. But if I just say, who's talking to who? A la the LinkedIn model.
Sure.
I can actually build models, and I can actually look at those and start building baselines very quickly.
How difficult, again, kind of going back to, I've published my own application inside of a container and had to define what talks to what. I was still confused. So are you modeling that for the end users, letting them see it and then, kind of make decisions, right? Because again, going back to, even if I've got a couple of hundred containers, I can't physically go to every, even with Kubernetes, right? I can't go there, manually mapping that out and then figuring out I need a tool to help me.
And
right?
doing that, if you had NetFlow, you'd never be able to do it. It's really impossible. So that's exactly what we do. Within about 48 hours from most environments, some environments are different than others, we're able to get about 99.99% confidence of the model. And by the way, that doesn't mean we're, artificial intelligence. It simply means we've created patterns that predict the next level of communication with 99.99% coverage. And it's simply by watching how applications communicate. But by defining that not in terms of addresses, but in terms of identity, it's much more resilient to the kinds of changes that are going to happen. You know, one of the things that people don't realize is even in your container environments, there's a lot of communication happening not in the container. There's a lot of common services and Active Directory and DNS and things that are happening that, by the way, are also avenues of insecurity.
Yep.
So being able to model not just container. Container isn't a panacea that, oh, if I'm in a container, I'm totally invulnerable to, or impervious.
Yeah. I mean, Run C showed us that
as a perfect example. And now they're in. The application might still be doing what it is, but there's another service running inside that container that has all the same communication privileges as your application. And that's why actually looking at what's happening and building a model based on that, it's pretty important.
So when you say application, people may, and I'm sure you've had this happen, interpret that as, oh, it's an application that I wrote and deployed out in some way. When you say application, it could be
anything
SSH, it could be like whatever, right?
It could be anything that either receives communication or requests communication. So it could be an infrastructure service, it could be a third-party thing, it could be your own application. It's not only things you develop, which is one of the challenges we faced, because there are some interesting new technologies in this zero trust networking space that if you have your own code, you're building your own application, you can incorporate libraries to essentially move the control plane literally into the code itself, but that's only good for things you have source code to that you're deploying.
Sure.
And so we wanted to start this and build the technology based on a way that was agnostic to that. You wrote it, great. You didn't write it, great. It came with the operating system, great. Anything that requests or uses network resources is what we consider application. The other word people use is workload, service.
Daemon, whatever.
Daemon.
Yeah, sure. We can debate that later, I guess.
Tomato. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at community. Zero trust, I think, to be honest, doesn't do it. Hearing you describe it and then thinking about when I hear zero trust, I feel like it's doing it a disservice. It's so much better than I think zero trust
Well, I'll let you know.
portrays it.
So when we started, zero trust wasn't yet a buzz, even though I know Forrester coined the term 10 years ago, but it wasn't really, it's caught, now everybody's saying zero trust. And being a technologist, when, it started catching on and we were discussing it as a company, hey, we want to talk about this, I was a little skeptic. I'm like, oh, it's just a buzzword, it's FUD. It doesn't describe the totality of, in fact, Gartner hates the term because they're like, well, zero trust, you have to establish trust at some point. It's a starting point, but it's not anything.
Yeah.
But the reason I sort of changed my opinion on that is people need TLAs. They need acronyms. They need short ways. They need something. We can't, like everything else in life, if you can't bottle it in a very quick sentence and describe it, at least at the highest level, your attention span. We're all ADD and it goes away. And zero trust is sort of a way of saying, stop trusting the way we were trusting. Start doing it a different way. It doesn't prescriptively, the term doesn't prescriptively describe what that means, but that's if I've caught your attention, now we can have a real conversation about what zero trust networking means.
I feel like this is something that we've been talking about forever, especially when traditional network firewalls first started coming out. There were many people who were way far ahead of the curve. In fact, I tell my Steve Carmody story all the time. Steve is someone we worked with at Brown.
Always 18 months ahead.
Yeah, in this case, he was like 18 years ahead, Patrick, right? We're talking about firewalls. Now, Steve heads the Shibboleth Federated Identity. And so we were talking about firewalls when I started at the university, and Steve was like, firewalls are a terrible idea. Like, why are we just putting these like stopgaps in the network? And it took me probably a couple of years of talking to Steve, because firewalls were the reason I was there. So obviously I was a little defensive, right? But then in talking to Steve, I was like, he's right. I'm like, he's really ahead of his time in that exactly what we're saying. Applications should know what other applications to trust. In the Google Beyond Corp model, applications should know what users to trust and how. Why do we need these firewalls that really, in his mind, just got in the way? And in fact, now that I've grown up, a little. He was right. And like almost 20 years ahead of his time. Have I ever told you that story, Patrick?
Now that your job doesn't depend on firewalls.
Right, exactly. I've been very open about talking about this now,
Firewalls
Patrick.
suck now.
I realize and appreciate how smart and visionary Steve Carmody was.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say about Steve Carmody that this is the guy that was into federated identity back when we were learning about passwords.
Yeah, yeah.
So what's he saying for the future? What's the future hold here?
Right now, we gotta go track him down and
Let's
get
get
him
him
out
in
on the show. Yeah,
I've got
He
to
was here not all that long.
I was
going to say he was here not all that long ago.
we
but
did
it
an
was
interview with Steve Carmody,
but it was a long time
ago.
It was a long time ago.
Right. I've got a panel at RSA coming up on the future of firewalls 2028. So
He would have been great for that panel.
RM.
And of course, you got the whole gamut from firewalls suck and they're dead to firewalls are long live the firewall. You know, the firewall's dead, long live it.
Right.
If you think about what firewalls when they got in the way, for me, it's this whole concept of segmentation, which is least access. That's what you want. You want everything in your network, in your environment, to only have access to what it needs. Now,
I feel like the technology wasn't there.
It wasn't
15, 20 years ago to even conceive of that. So we had to go back to the network, right?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, actually. I think you're all circling around it. One of the big failings of firewalls, and I think somewhat tangentially a failing of the OSI model, is we never successfully linked the application identity and the user identity with the layer 4 and layer 3 information. And so that gap has plagued that communication security world for as long as we've been doing security and beyond, right? Now, absolutely. I think there has been, just as you're describing, there's been much better success in that world at linking that application identity and that user identity with the actual flow of information or communication that's occurring, which actually enables the proper securing of the path, which in the traditional layer 3, layer 4 world just didn't happen.
Jeff, I want to get Jeff's take on this. Jeff was working in pen testing and firewall security back in the day when they were first coming on the scene, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I started in the commercial world, we were doing vulnerability assessments, and most of it was to try to convince people to install a firewall because they were connecting to the internet, which is the original cloud, by the way. But I was thinking about this the other day because I've been kind of asking people on Twitter the last couple weeks, how many firewall rules is reasonable to have? And because I've been
there's just one, Jeff. It's any allow. That's all you need. Everything works. It's great.
It makes everything work. We're done.
IP any permit, right?
Well, but I was thinking about it the other day, sort of philosophically, because that's what I do. Is like how many holes do you punch in a firewall before it ceases to be a firewall?
One.
And what we've been saying. Ever was a
says the full-time penetration tester, very accurately so.
One.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Because then it's a firewall with a hole in it.
Yes. It's true.
I mean,
a holy firewall.
Yeah.
But I was talking to Marcus, it's probably been a year ago now, because I was thinking, this whole industry has just, started with let's put out firewalls. And I asked him, I said, have you ever imagined what our industry would be like if and he doesn't take credit for inventing the firewall, but, if the firewall had never been invented, what would our industry look like?
Better.
I think it was inevitable that we had some kind of stopgap measure.
That's actually a great question. I want to bring that to my panel at RSA.
That's a good panel question.
Yeah, if there was no firewall, what would life be like?
Because I think it would have eventually evolved into something that restricted access in not the correct way that we're talking about in the context of zero trust networking. I think what I was like, why do I have to manage all these firewall rules? Conceptually, if these applications knew who to trust and people hardened their systems appropriately, why do I need to put something in the way? They really, back to Steve Carmody's point, that really, in the end, just gets in the way.
But the underlying protocols we use don't have a mechanism for establishing trust.
That's a good point.
And Marcus, by the way, hates standards being written by people who haven't used them. So he has a whole rant he does on this.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. Right. But I'm not against, just to be clear, I'm not against firewalls. They're an interesting thing, just like I'm not against highways. We need them to get places, but they're just basically broad lanes. They're not security. They're not actually helping define who's allowed to go from place to place. They're just enabling them. So, look, they had a purpose, and in a time and day when, as you said, you had an application you put on a machine in a rack somewhere, that's where it sat. Made total sense. We have customers now, they've got some virtual instance or many, and they're running 12 applications, obviously many different services, but let's say 12 business applications, and they're physically on the same IP, or at least the same public IP addresses, against one database server that's actually serving different databases. How do you secure that? You don't secure that through just firewalls and through IP addresses, because it doesn't make sense. Basically, you're saying all my apps can talk to all my databases, is what you end up saying, and that's a highway, that's not a security.
Right.
I think part of I think what you're saying, and maybe I think about it a slightly different way, but I think we're saying the same thing or thinking the same thing, is, from the beginning, we as an industry or we as a civilization have never really tried to tackle, what is the security problem here? What are we trying to solve? And what's the best, most cost-effective way to do that? That seems like it's too complicated, but there's somebody's selling me something that says it's going to solve my problem. Okay, I'll buy one of those or two of those or six of those or 1,000 of those. And you can look at just about every technology product out there today or throughout our brief history and probably come up with a reason why that really didn't need to exist, because it was a panacea, or it was here's an idea. Maybe most of the security technologies throughout our brief history are placebos.
No, or Band-Aids.
Well, I mean, this idea that convenience trumps security, this isn't new, right? It's always been the case that security's been an afterthought. You build an internet-enabled toaster or refrigerator or thermostat, that's what they're building. They're building a function. They don't think, well, what's the potential security? I can actually get your Wi-Fi password, or I know when you're home or not, and all of a sudden there's vulnerabilities. But that wasn't the way we baked it into our thoughts, because security is generally thought of as an inconvenience. So it's not a surprise that we don't design things securely, and then we figure out, well, we got to Band-Aid them. And so you either Band-Aid them in the front door, which is sort of the firewall model, or you try to bring that model closer to what it is you're trying to secure with different levels of resistance. TLS, what is it? TLS 1.3, the new standard is going to come out. That's going to screw up all DPI. If you can no longer man in the middle, so there is no more layer 7 inspection on the wire, SDN or not, what do you do then? Now you've got a new secure protocol, but you can't do identity by looking at how they're communicating. You have to do something else. So it's fun times, let me put it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting as you described it. It really takes me back to my thinking along the way of there'll be a day someday where nobody needs a firewall, on a traditional firewall on the network, that everyone will just have a way of securely communicating and authenticating and to people and applications to applications. Right.
And I think that is, by the way, that's a great way of expressing what's zero trust.
Yeah.
Non-zero trust, sort of the default model was I create safe zones, and everybody in my safe zone, they can talk. Non-zero trust is everybody's in the infected world. We're all sitting on an infected network. Right. And so how do I do trust at that point? I kind of look at it like, I'm hoping it's not like the pendulum, but how there's this every 10 years, either there's the advice that infants are supposed to sleep on their side or infants are supposed to sleep on their back. Every 10 years it changes, depending on when you had your kids. And, first, do we have flat networks? Do we have segmented networks? Do we have micro-segmented networks? Do we have flat? Honestly, like in a true zero trust world, the world is flat. I'm a flat earther in this regard, I guess. The world is flat, but everybody is segmented by their identity and their trust. They're just living in a flat world.
Flat earthers have supporters around the globe.
It's for real. The struggle is real.
What's interesting though, I think about people's home firewalls, right? And I think some of us may start to think like, oh, but that's a good application of it, right? Like, don't let anything in, but let everything out, and that's protecting people. And I'm like, but no, we're letting everything out. Or if we're restricting what goes out, now we've got issues. And we even see it when you get down to, okay, well, let's just look at the domain names, and we'll say what's bad and what's not. Even that can be problematic on a user basis.
Well, and
Obviously,
even that
threat
could be-
intelligence and enterprise, different story. But from a user basis, right? Like,
Oh, how many times have you seen infected DNS servers and basically you think you're at yahoo.com? You're not.
you're not. Yeah, exactly. There's a million ways to skin that cat. So even in that sense, it's a bad idea.
People still go to yahoo.com.
It didn't say AOL.com.
Oh,
Yahoo.com.
you get those shiny coasters.
Oh, no,
from there.
what's that? Wait, no, there's a new name. What did they call it? Isn't that, it's a new name. What's Yahoo's called now?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, did they change their name?
Bankrupt?
No. You got no. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did change its name. Let's find out.
We have Google, so
We
we
have-
can
we
figure out
can-
what Yahoo did, right?
Quick, ask Bing.
Yeah, exactly.
Who?
I went to yahoo.com and it's still called Yahoo.
No,
Yeah.
the website's called Yahoo, but no. Altaba.
Never heard that before.
I was thinking
he
it
just
started
made
with
up
an
a
Is
L.
that-
word.
is
They're
that-
like in the background going, quick, ass, make up a word, make up a word.
Quick, buy that domain. It's going to be worth a fortune tomorrow.
Is that like Hebrew for bankrupt? I don't know.
Who
It's Alta
is
Vista.
Altaba?
That's anti-Semantic.
Huh.
No, it's got a different name. It's still called Yahoo, but nobody.
It's definitely not called Altaba.
No, it's definitely not. I think it's Kofefi, but
That's Kofifi, that's right. It's
Oh, boy. So, Harry, if people want to learn more, obviously they can go to edgewise.net/security weekly and get it. Now, do you have a demo trial? Like, how are you handling
absolutely.
this?
So you can sign up for a demo. You can sign up for a trial. I think we're doing a special promotion at Security Weekly. So if they want to actually just sign up for a trial where no protection, just no enforcement. We will map out your network and show your exposure. They can do that as well.
Awesome.
And you're giving a panel at RSA, it sounds like.
And I'm hosting a panel at RSA.
Yeah, so go see that.
Yeah, when is the panel? Do you know? Or what's the name of it?
At RSA.
It's at RSA.
At RSA.
During RSA.
It's long lived. It's the future state of the firewall 2028.
Who else is on it with you?
So
Harry?
Marcus Raymond, Adam
Marcus
Shostak.
Random, you mean?
Well,
Did
random.
you say random? Does it?
We just need more limoncello here.
Well, it's random.
In this context, we can say Marcus and then Adam Shostak.
Well, you say Damon.
I do say Damon.
So Raynham.
I always wanted to call him Marcus Random.
Adam Shostak.
Adam Shostak and Jennifer, and the last name's evading me. I apologize. But
know
a great panel of
A lot of Jennifers in this
boy.
field. Which Jennifer? Who's she affiliated with?
She's-
IO Active Jennifer or
you can make me look.
North Carolina Jennifer?
I'm going
or-
to tell you right now.
Okay.
All right.
We'll look that up.
Well, yeah. I'll look that up while you're.
During the break, we're going to look that up. Right? Yeah. We haven't done 5 questions with you, Harry.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Oh, sweet.
Never been on PSW. Now you've got to answer 5 questions while you look up the Jennifer on your phone.
Manila.
Jennifer Manila. It's North Carolina
thank you.
Jennifer, yes. So,
Thank you.
Harry, are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I'm ready to play 5 questions.
Everyone lies to that first question.
Did that count as one scenario?
That doesn't.
I
There's
only got
5
4
more
left.
questions now.
You see, that was just a ruse.
That's right. I guess it's 6
That's
questions.
just practice.
So 3 words to describe yourself. There's
We
no
can edit
right
this
or
pause
wrong
out,
answer.
right?
Energetic.
That one's wrong. Just kidding.
Whatever you said to that person, Patrick was going to tell you were wrong.
Vengeful.
I'm parked in the front, by the way.
Inspired.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
No, it would definitely be what's the Japanese sword?
Katana?
Yeah.
Or Wakizashi, depending on the length.
Okay.
Sorry.
Says the sword knife expert.
I forgot I'm a guy who makes knives
or the
for a
Tonto,
living.
right? Yeah, the Tonto's the little one.
Forgot we had Tori Hanzo here on the show. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Wow.
It's a good
That's
title.
great.
I like.
That's
That's actually
good.
a really good title.
I'm going with that.
Final answer. Final
The
answer.
library. Do you have? Wow.
This one's the easiest one. It's multiple choice. There's only 2 choices. In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
First.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
This is the hard one.
That's what she said.
It's not really multiple choice. It's not really multiple choice.
Well,
There are-
technically it
Sure,
is.
Yeah,
This
kind
is-
of
It is.
unlimited
I mean, I'm not
choices.
giving you the.
But
there are
with two syllable, and I'm allowed to have like a little bit of an Oedipus complex here. I
Totally.
assume.
Of course.
It's you have complete creative.
They can even
freedom.
be the same gender if you'd like.
We don't.
Right.
Yeah, we don't judge. It can
Well,
be.
look,
it can be.
Gwyneth Paltrow's my mom. Just laying that out
Sure,
there.
that was an easy.
Yeah, totally
right there.
there. And I think
Was she Iron? It's Iron Man. Is that correct?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
she's not
Gotcha.
Iron Man,
Oh,
she's the
yeah.
assistant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then what? Yeah. I got you.
Whatever that
My son's getting into Marvel, and we just watched that.
At least they're not getting into DC, because Marvel Universe.
They're favoring Marvel.
I thought that would be the question, like Marvel or DC kind of thing.
Nope.
And so my father, I'm going to have to go with Harrison Ford. I think that's a good-looking couple, and that's just my way of saying I wouldn't be as balding. I'd be much better looking.
I was going to say, what happened?
Harrison Ford and Gwyneth Paltrow had a kid, and Harry popped out, and somebody was lying there.
Somebody was asleep at the
Just call
switch.
him Harry Ford. Anyway.
Harry, thank you so much. That was an awesome segment. Harry's, of course, going to stick around. Are you going to stick
Yeah, I'll stick around for a bit.
And you can go to edgewise.net/securityweekly. Make sure you go there, check it out, and get for a month of free workload visibility. A special for Security Weekly listeners. Stay tuned. We're coming back with tonight's technical segment.
Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/Security Weekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network.
Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs. Their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Ocean. That's where I used to work, actually, at Ocean. They're hosting a conference on cybersecurity in Rhode Island. Cybersecurity Exchange Day on March 13th at the O'Hare Academic Building at Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. That sounds familiar, Patrick.
I think that's where Layer 8 conference was last year.
It, in fact, was, my friends. You can register now at ocean.org/events. Some jackass by the name of Paul Asadorian, I think, is giving the keynote, so you may want to check that out, I guess.
I think somebody else is speaking there, too.
Are you speaking there, too?
I'm speaking there, too. This is going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Speak at the same conference again.
Right.
Like the fourth or fifth time.
Yeah.
One time you spoke for me, which was awesome.
Yeah. That was the best. I'm just sitting there in the audience, and the organizer comes over, and he's like, Paul's not here. Can you step in? I'm like, yeah. So I go up, and I talk about something. I don't even know what. Paul calls me a little while later. He's like, I'm so sorry, man.
Just total miscommunication. My fault completely. Just forgot to show up. It happens. It happens.
Whoops. Hey, remember that time you had to speak for John? At DerbyCon? John Smith?
Yeah, I did. Well, John he had travel issues.
Right, but
travel issues, so he says.
Yeah, the best part of it was that he sent you slides and they were all in Prezi format. So it's just a picture and you had
no idea. It was like playing slideshare roulette.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, it's slideshare roulette.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's actually fun.
Secure World Boston is hosting their 15th annual conference March 27th through the 28th. Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners get $100 off by visiting secureworldexpo.com and using the code SecurityWeekly. All righty. Oh, this is my technical segment, enterprise-ish network security. I say ish because as I was going through building this stuff, I'm like, this is really like some enterprise level features. Now it's not really like there's no like core routing and switching and fancy firewalls and all that stuff and 10,000 or plus endpoints. However, what I built, I was actually like telling some people about it. They're like, that's actually pretty cool. How much did that cost you? I'm like, you could build this for like less than $1,000 and have
a week of your life.
Yeah.
So it's enterprise-ish at the cost of like consumer-ish.
Yes, exactly. I mean, even less than some consumer.
My switch costs more than $1,000.
Right? Like some of the consumer stuff is really expensive. So if you're on the consumer side, this is like a really high-end consumer network or small business network at a really low cost. And I did do the wireless with Ubiquiti, and if you do hang one, Ubiquiti AP, they're like $79 now. They support 802.1Q trunking. Like it's
pretty impressive.
And they're gig, and they work really well.
So it was enterprise-ish when you were all
That's why I said enterprise-ish. And what really did it, we were upgrading our bandwidth, and we actually have multiple connections to the internet now. And that's what sparked this whole thing, was me trying to figure out how to make use of each link. Oh, by the way, now we have a gig to the internet, which means everything else, and those of you that have a gig at home or at work, right, know that everything else behind that now has to be up to spec. Like there's no more cheating. Like, oh, there's a category 5 cable running somewhere. Like that's gonna now.
I only have a 100 meg switch. It's fine.
It's
but my
fine.
limit's the internet at 75.
Right? Yeah, it ups your game. So, and the other thing that Matt Alderman likes to point out is now that we have a CEO, one of the things I tasked the CEO with is come up with a budget. So me being the hacker, now when Matt says the budget, I want to see like how far under the budget that I can come and still accomplish maybe even more than what I had set out to do while still coming way under budget. Like I'm hacking the system in a good way. I mean, you run a company, Harry. Like, why not come way under budget?
But you don't
right?
get commission for the savings. That's the thing that sucks about it.
Well, I'm part owner of the company, so it helps. I mean, you know, like more profit helps if you're the owner of the company.
It's your
right?
money.
Yeah. So that's really what sparked this whole thing, full transparency. And so I set out to build some stuff. Now, the first thing I'll talk about are the firewalls. And these were featured a long time ago when Greg Foss came on the show from Logarithm, and he talked about these COTOM firewalls. Now, I will warn you, these most of the time ship directly from China, like literally on the slow boat. DHL tries to deliver them. But I challenge you to find your firewall hardware vendor and prove to me that at least some of the components aren't manufactured in China.
What could go wrong?
Right? It's kind of scary when your entire firewall in a box comes from China.
Right. It's literally fresh off the boat.
They're probably listening to me like right now, like ni hao. There's a listening device in here. It's cool.
Wow.
It built right in. It's great. But no, these are cool because one reason they're fanless, and the entire case is the heatsink, which is nice. Now, I did, in future segments, I'll talk about some of the other add-ons that I bought. There are some USB-powered fans that you can sit on top of these to help, you know, the heat come off of them. And in our server closet, that's probably a good thing because it runs a little hot. It's like a balmy 80 degrees in there most of the time, which is nice if you want to warm up in the winter. So there are some add-ons. So these come with 4 gig Ethernet ports, some USB ports. You can do VGA serial or a combination thereof. Yeah, that's how you install it initially.
Wow. It's state of the art.
Wow. State of the art. Yeah.
Wow, 2007 called and wants to.
I don't know why.
It could be CGA.
It's a good point. I don't know why they did that instead of HDMI, but that's the way these come. Maybe it was
It's probably cheaper on the chipset.
Cheaper to do it. And you only.
You're going to do it once.
Exactly what Harry said. You use it once to install the OS. You put pfSense or OpenSense on a thumb drive, you install it, and then like, you're off.
The only kicker is kind of like getting a DVD now in the mail. You have to find the hardware to plug it in to do that one time. But
the thing that does suck without this, some of my other models have HDMI and a serial console, so it will vary, is if I wanted to have a serial console server somewhere, I wouldn't be able to do that necessarily with VGA, although I haven't looked into the options there. The kicker with that is, though, it has to hit the network somewhere, so designing, to have that level of failover is kind of, I guess I could have a separate internet connection for that. Anyway, so these are really cool. This one's actually not the one in the show notes. The one in the show notes is really awesome. It's a little beefier. It's 16 gigs of RAM, or 8 gigs of RAM with a 16 gig SSD. This one that I'm holding is actually the one for my house. It's 8 gigs of RAM with a 64 gig SSD. Your total cost on this one's $251, and it ships Prime. So this one actually shipped from, I believe, within the U.S. This one didn't come directly from China, so this was already pre-imported.
It may have been imported and being serviced by Amazon.
Yeah, and it's an Intel processor, again, with full gig. Now, in my testing, I will say with this hardware, I've tested both OpenSense and pfSense. These things will push gig without breaking a sweat. I mean, and I'm monitoring, I'll talk about my monitoring, but I'm monitoring CPU temperature, memory, the whole thing. Like, it barely breaks a sweat when you're pushing full gig. And I know that's true because when we push all our shows up to the internet, we're consuming a lot of bandwidth. We were exceeding our 150 pipe, which I didn't realize. Every time we publish a show, we're using our entire internet pipe. Oof. So when we push, it's more like 300 meg roughly. So the gig was really helpful, and these things do great. And they run about $250 to $300, depending on your options. And so I really like them. A lot of the models also have Wi-Fi on them. I chose a different solution for Wi-Fi. Having 4 ports is nice because if you've got multiple internets, an internal network, and a Wi-Fi, and or a connection to a high availability firewall, that's all possible. pfSense, OpenSense, and Ubiquiti, most Ubiquiti gear, at least the Unify products I'm using, also support 802.1q trunking, which means I don't necessarily have to burn a port for my Wi-Fi. I can use VLANs and put that on another port and write firewall rules accordingly with virtual interfaces, which is nice. So that's, there's another, sorry, Jeff, there's another manufacturer that looks to be more based in the U.S. It's Protecti, something like that. There is another manufacturer, which I'll cover on a different show. If you look on Amazon, you'll see some of their devices. Yeah, it's Protectly is the other provider. They're a little more expensive, but essentially the same design. You know, heatsink, Intel processor. You can get 2 to this one that I'm looking at has 6 gig ports on it, and that one is $500. So, Joff?
Oh, it's just really funny that the one that I got, Paul, which is kind of very, very similar box, I actually just sent a picture to you, is
oh yeah,
the Protectly.
Protectly, sure, yep.
Which is 8 gig RAM, 128 gig mSATA SSD. But it's a perfect little footprint, that size box to implement, you know, whatever you want to implement on there. In my case, I did custom Ubuntu.
There you go.
Linux on it, but you know, I think the footprint with the 4 NICs on it and Intel processor, gig NICs, ability to do .1Q, it's a nice flexible little box.
Absolutely. Now, I did at some point kind of realize the need for an actual real Cisco switch. I think there's a lot of gear that you can buy, you know, off the shelf, cheaper gear from TP-Link and Netgear and all that stuff. And some of that stuff says it's managed, but the management is god-awful on that stuff. And if you're going to, especially if you're doing this at home because you want to either build a lab or upgrade your internet at home so that you're working with, you know, BSD firewalls and networking and trunking, you're going to want a Cisco switch and you're going to want to learn Cisco switch commands. What I also realized is that other brands of switching are like really close to Cisco. We had an HP switch that we were using in the interim as a backup because one of our switches died. Unplugged it, plugged it back in, and it never came back. There was some hardware failure. So I got this HP switch, and when I consoled into it, I was like, wow, that's like exactly like Cisco iOS. I really feel kind of right at home right now.
You could have gotten a Huawei and have been also right at home.
Is that the same thing?
Yeah, well, that was the, I don't know how true it is or not, but I believe it is that Huawei ripped off Cisco's source code years ago. And then
Sure. And Cisco took it largely from BSD, although who knows what it is. So I ordered some switches from eBay. So obviously, if you're in an enterprise, right, you've got a contract with either Cisco directly or a reseller. When we worked at Brown, we did the whole big network upgrade while I was there, which is a great experience to see all that gear come in and see all the costs and warranty and maintenance. I was in a lot of those meetings, and so I get it on the enterprise side. It's going to be very different. I was like, well, for our small network, I really want Cisco switches. I don't want to pay these things 3560s. Joff and others retail for like $3,000, depending on the features.
They're not cheap.
They're like
even the used ones.
Even the used ones, legit used ones, not the ones that I bought. Legit used ones will run you $1,500 or so on Amazon.
So who'd you steal that from?
If you go to eBay, and there's a link in the show notes, and I don't know what kind of license violation there is because there's no support, there's no contract on them. And obviously these were like recycled from businesses that went out of business or Chapter 11 or whatever. Like I don't pretend to know where they're getting them from.
So they came from Yahoo.
Maybe they came from Yahoo's original network. So these 3560s run me about $170 each. And so for that cost, I can buy a couple, and if one dies, I can have another one to swap in or whatever. Now, be careful. Don't make the same mistake I did, because I've got a few more switches than I had originally intended. Big difference between a 3560 and a 3560G. 3560s or
Yes,
10100
there
ports, right, Joff? Joff knew. I should have asked Joff.
Versus
48 ports, 10100, 1000 on the G.
800 meg, it's good enough, right?
But what's interesting, Joff, even after I had made that mistake, I was like, well, not everything needs gig. So, like, I threw one here in the studio, right? But they've got 4, I call them GBIC ports.
Yep.
I don't know, is that the right?
GBIC, yep.
GBIC.
That's what I called them.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
4 GBIC ports, and so you can put any kind of module that's supported by this hardware and software in there. You can get non-Cisco ones for $20 that support gig. I'll link those in future segments. So basically, I placed an order to put a whole bunch of gig ports in there. So I mean, you can port channel a couple of these gig to another switch and still have 2 gigabit or 3 gigabit ports on it, and then have your 10100 for other things. In the server rack, I did 2 3560Gs that are gig across the whole thing. I actually put 4 GBICs in each one, port channeled them, so there's a 4 gig connection between the switches.
I'm surprised.
Can I interject really quickly?
Please do, Jeff.
I just want to say I feel like I'm watching QVC right now.
Yeah. Well, I thought rather than pictures, Jeff, that I'd actually hold some stuff up for the camera.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Okay.
I feel like I'm watching QVC.
You need the overlay.
I
Showing
do.
the price channel.
Now, how
many
much would you
bidder-
pay?
I don't have any GBICs handy. I think I used everyone I ordered. I used the.
I'm
If you
surprised.
order now,
Yeah, right?
We'll throw in.
I'm
We'll
surprised
throw
you
in the
didn't get
Ronco knives.
the 10 gig GBICs.
Those were a lot more expensive, and I for what I was. So I'm monitoring all those ports, and in subsequent ones I'll show you the Zabbix server. I'll talk about it on this segment, but I'll show you the Zabbix server.
It's all right. I get creds.
Yeah, what's that?
I said, don't worry. I get creds. You posted it in Slack like a week ago.
Yeah. So you can monitor all 4 ports, and like we're not touching the the bandwidth on the interconnect, right? If we do, then I'll order a 10 gig one, swap it in, and be off to the races. So again, I don't know if I'm in violation of some kind of license by ordering these over eBay. There's no support contract on them. The manufacturer that sells them, I forget the name, they've been great to deal with, by the way. So the one that's linked to in the show notes, I've ordered a lot of Cisco gear from, and I've had great luck with them. In fact, this last time they sent me 1 switch, they're supposed to send me 2. I sent them an email and opened a ticket with them, and in less than an hour, they were like, oh my God, my bad. Here's the tracking number for your additional switch. It'll be there in the next day, maybe 2 the most. It came, and I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, everyone makes mistakes. Like, you totally like made up for it and fixed your mistakes. So they've been, other than that one little hiccup, they've been great. The gear has been good, except for the one that was running for a really long time, and then I unplugged it and plugged it. But this gear's old to start with, so know that going in, when you buy a $170 switch from eBay, it's already got some mileage on it, so it may die. So buy a couple at that price point. Now, the nice part about this is I'm doing span ports, port channeling, and VLANs, which is once it all came back to me was pretty easy to read the docs, and now it took me a while to relearn it. It had been some time since I had worked with it. It was pretty easy to configure and all worked nicely. I think they came with iOS 12.1 or 12.2.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. If you need to do an iOS update,
then you need to buy a support contract or find a friend with a support contract to get a
for
newer
those models
operating system. Yeah, these will support SSH. I configured SSH on them as well. I don't think they have the routing modules built into them, but I don't need the routing.
It's a switch,
I need a switch with a span port with VLANs and Ether channel, essentially, right? Because we got a Drobo that has 2 gig interfaces, so this is perfect, right?
Yep.
I don't know, Paul. With our earlier conversation, you might like the router.
Right. Now that you got me thinking, Joff, yes, I probably could use that.
But phone a friend. I think you have some friends. Just by the way.
Absolutely.
And so, Paul, I had a similar problem in my home office that I needed a better switch in the office. But my requirements were a little bit different. I needed gig, multiple ports. I needed higher port density than I already had. I think I had 12 ports. I wanted 24 or 48. I don't remember which, because if I was going to grow, I was going to just grow bigger.
Sure.
The big one, because it was in my office. I sit here, the switch is here, fanless.
Yeah.
Had to be fanless.
These go in our server room.
Yeah.
So I'm like, whatever. If they're loud, they're loud.
No,
I don't care.
That's my one complaint actually about Cisco switches. They are not quiet.
Yeah. I lived through the fan enabled era of my home network,
Yes.
as you remember. I had some single 1U Nokia devices that PFSense was put on them. And because they weren't running the Nokia OS, there was no fan control. And you could hear those fans with the basement door closed. On the second, they're in the basement at the bottom of the stairs. You could hear them on the second story of our house in the back.
Wow.
When it
It
was
was going
quiet
through
at
the whole
night.
ductwork.
Yeah. Couldn't you? Yeah,
Oh, no.
exactly.
Oh, no.
Exactly.
No, you could actually hear the sound come up the stairwell and up to the second floor.
But ductwork will. We had doing some soundproofing thing. Ductwork will carry sound.
Yeah.
Well, the fans, it's the noise. It's the first thing that's going to break. I'm sure it loves the cigar smoke.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, I didn't need as many ports. I think I have the 12-port, the SMC smart switches.
Yep.
Is what I used at home, and it allows me to do the VLANs, the trunking.
Yep.
And it's fanless.
What I also like for Cisco is when I do segments on the show. I mean, Cisco's pretty standard.
no,
People can apply that to their.
The joke that I always heard was no one was ever fired for buying Cisco.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So the cabling is important. And I tell you, having the network that started at my old house where we started the podcast and then moved to my new house and then moved here and went through multiple iterations here, that, back when we started the pod 14 years ago, right? I mean, yeah, if it was Cat 5, it was Cat 5, right? Like our internets weren't 150 or gig like they are today. So it wasn't that important. So I was like, as long as the cable didn't look like it was going to fall apart in my hands.
Right, and the tabs were still on it, so it stayed plugged in.
Yeah.
Because you had one of those.
I
remember.
did, yeah. And then, so like cables were good. Always break. And then over time, I was like, no, we need to replace those cables. For a lot of, machines started becoming gig. The switches were starting to become gig. And I was like, okay, we should have gig cable. Even as recent as last week, I found what I believe to be the last Cat 5 cable plugged. I was like, how did that get there?
Nice.
So cabling is really important. The nice part is cables have come way down in price. So what I realized was when we did gig, one of the big problems was that my connection to a couple of units down where I was getting the gig connection, it was a Cat 5e cable, but there was an end terminated on it. On the cable, it comes out of the box that you're not really supposed to terminate an end directly to for whatever reason. Geoff could probably describe it better. That went to something else that punched down into a receptacle that wasn't really in. It was like dangling in the receptacle that another cable was plugged into. That was plugged into another cable with a receptacle that was plugged into a cable that had the end on it. That would not negotiate gig, no matter what I did. Did not matter.
You got 300 baud amazingly well, though.
Right? Yeah. And so I was like, well, I need to buy some. So you can buy cables. This one was like 100-foot Cat 6 cable. It's flat, and it comes with the little plastic things with the nails in it, and you get the whole kit. So you can run the cable. You can tack it up.
It's flat?
Do we have... there's one laying around here somewhere. I can show you after. I didn't bring one of the cables. But it's flat.
Flat? How does that work?
It's flat. I would imagine the pairs are twisted inside, even though they are twisted, right, Jeff, based on last week's conversation.
Yeah. Mike, how does that work? Because I know, we use those cables that stretch out and go back in.
Yes.
And they're flat, and they're not twisted.
Right.
And
this one is twisted. I have tested it with a cable tester, and I am pushing gig through it without issue.
I won't dispute it then.
So
just for clarity, though, Cat 5e will indeed carry gig quite well.
Correct. Absolutely.
It will not, however, as I discovered recently, carry 10 gig. Because
they do. Well, yeah, so there's Cat 6e or Cat 7. I mean, you could probably do it over Cat 6 as well. I mean, it depends on your distance and all that stuff.
You have to use a higher quality dilithium crystal. That's all.
That's right, and make sure your flux capacitor is tuned accordingly.
Right.
Exactly.
But is it all meet PCI?
I'm not sure of.
Is it PCI compliant? Yeah.
The same company makes Cat 7 cables, which they're not that much more expensive. If you're going to run a new cable, what I did in my house was I just ran a Cat 7 because when 10 gig comes around, the cable's already there, right?
Yep. I ran Cat 11 in my house.
Cat 11.
Yeah, we actually I can light speed communicate.
It goes to 11.
It goes to...
When
Your
you need a
dials
little bit
all go to
more
11. Your
internet.
It's sort of like
cables are all 11, Harry. We get it.
Remember when fiber to the desktop was the thing?
Right?
Yeah, that was weird.
last mile fiber.
So the other hardware that I'm using for my enterprise-ish setup here are Raspberry Pis, believe it or not. To do DNS and DHCP, I don't like to put that stuff on the firewall. And let me tell you, when you get to high availability and load balancing multiple WAN connections, you're going to really screw yourself with DNS and DHCP once you start getting to that setup. So best to take it off the firewall as early as you can. There's a lot of great benefits to that. So I actually have 4 DNS and DHCP servers. They're $50. I don't know. What are you paying for Raspberry Pis?
Yeah,
these days? I bought a kit for $50. It comes with the power connector, the case, the heat sinks.
SD card.
Does it come with an SD card? This one I don't think did.
$50 or $60 by the time you're done, depending on how large of an SD card you want. I mean,
Right.
I still have Pis that I'm using with modern Pi 3s with 8 gig SDs because I don't need a lot of storage space for a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Or if I do, it's text.
I'd be curious to see like what the limitations are on performance and throughput with DNS and DHCP. Like what kind of, I know for here it's fine, right? But I'm like, we're not a gigantic network, and it works just fine. I'm using Pi-hole on some of them to do the blacklisting, black hole DNS kind of thing, which is really easy. The nice part is it's easy to set up. The bad part is it's not really all that. When you get into like the in-depth configuration, it's not as good. But it works just fine. As a caching DNS server and DHCP, it works just great. And they're $50.
I ran into a problem there, Paul. And that was I don't have a Pi hole, but I have a manual version of that configuration. You and I worked on this.
Yep.
And my malware domains configuration file is 30,000 lines long, and that's running into bind. I'm just looking at it right now. And with 30,000 domains configured into bind and then running in memory, bind ends up taking up just shy of 1 gig of RAM. And so you have to be a little careful with your resources there, that you might run into challenges with a Raspberry Pi style solution. Mine's actually running on the firewall, but it depends how much you're doing with bind.
That's a great point. The other point, too, is the Raspberry Pis are ARM, and so you're going to be limited to what kind of software you can put on it. For example, we use one of our sponsors, actually, Automox, for patching, and there's no ARM support, right? Largely because the enterprises probably don't have a lot of Raspberry Pis floating around.
Probably not using those.
Probably not using those, which I get it, and I get it. So probably looking to upgrade those to something else down the road just to get better support from some of my other tools, which are actually used, like Automox in the enterprise. So, but if you're looking to go on the cheap, you can have lots of Raspberry Pis. I find they work great for DNS DHCP. On to software. Has anyone else played with OpenSense and pfSense? Either of those two?
I've done a lot of pfSense. I have not gone full hog on OpenSense. I put it in a VM and played with it a little bit. Sure, that's about it.
It's interesting.
Not me. I built my own. So as you know,
yeah, and it's interesting to look at the flame wars between the two projects. I don't know if the OpenSense developers did they work on pfSense originally. I haven't gotten to tracking down the network and security engineers at the respective projects and bringing them on the show. I am planning on doing that because I think it'd be a lot of fun. Not at the same time, although that would be a lot. It could be very wildly entertaining. But so I think some of the I'm not sure what the decisions were in pfSense that sparked the community to fork pfSense and Moonwall to create OpenSense. Some of the things are pfSense did make an announcement, which is why I was using OpenSense. They made an announcement that as of version 2.5 of pfSense, they would only support hardware that had the AES-NI capability built into the chip. And largely that was for encryption, for encrypted communications of some encryption of some kind, co-processing. And I actually thought that when they made that announcement a couple of years ago, that was a big deal. I'm like, this is the end of the world. Now, what I've realized recently is a few things. One, they have not released 2.5 yet. even though they said it was going to be released by now, it's not released. They also said, pfSense, that they'll support 2.4 for a year before they stop supporting it. So if you have non-AES-NI chipsets, which are cheaper, it's okay. Now, what's happened in the past couple of years is what happens with computing, right? The cheaper hardware now supports AES-NI. In fact, the firewall I linked to in there is $300. It's a Kotam device. It's an Intel i5 with AES-NI support in it. So not as big of a deal. The other thing I've noticed is that in a general sense, I find OpenSense, especially in their more recent release, and I even tried the next most recent stable release, is a little buggy. It's just, it doesn't seem quite as polished as pfSense in terms of maintaining state, the responsiveness of the interface, and some of the other features just seem more polished in pfSense, largely because Netgate is now the commercial company behind it.
Yep.
They sell commercial hardware and software. Their hardware that's comparable to some of the things I'm building is around $800 a firewall. So if you're going to have two, like we're planning, it's $1,600 for the commercial stuff or $600 for the not commercial stuff. So there's always that as well. They're both based, on BSD, so all of the BSD protocol. I think earlier we were talking about CARP, which is like their version of open source version of HSRP. There's a lot of great functionality. Like I said, AO21Q trunking, all kinds of stuff that in terms of logging, and the graphs that they give you on it are awesome. NetFlow. There's just a lot of features in this open source software that you'd normally find in enterprise level gear, and here it all is in open source operating systems. The last piece of software that I had was Zabbix. Has anyone else played around with Zabbix? Have you ever done Nagios? Ever done Nagios before? Zabbix is pretty similar to Nagios. It's got a great community behind it, a lot of functionality. As with any monitoring platform, there's a learning curve, right? And having never used Zabbix before, it was pretty easy to get set up, but the tuning is a process. Like getting basic stuff, or you read the docs, you get the basic stuff, and then you're like, well, I want to make a graph for this, or it's a lot of reading and testing. And then you're like, I want this advanced feature that pulls all the vulnerabilities from a vulndb and compares it against a package listing. That's a lot more setup and a lot more reading and all that. So there is a commitment, I think, in any monitoring platform. Zabbix was no exception. It is free and open source, which I'm actually pretty amazed. That's the Zabbix. Did I send you that screenshot, or did you hack into my Zabbix server, which is totally fine?
You posted it in the IRC channel and told us to log in as guest.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
IRC Slack channel.
Yeah, I gave you guys access to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So having those graphs have just been awesome, especially as I work with the internet connections and the new switches. I can monitor every switch port, every firewall, see all the utilization graphs for traffic, make sure everything is flowing correctly, and that's all open source.
Can you set up it as alerting?
It does have alerting, very advanced alerting that I have not quite gotten to configuring completely yet. But yeah, it'll email, it'll text.
You can tell when the shows happen and when Paul surfs their porn.
That's when they post the shows. You can definitely see when the shows happen. Actually, it's kind of interesting. I didn't see a huge spike in bandwidth, right? Because it's not consuming a lot of bandwidth.
Right.
It's got a connection, and it's more about latency than it is about bandwidth when we have streaming the show out or remote guests or hosts on via Zoom or Skype. When we see a lot of bandwidth utilization, I realize is when we actually post the shows. I was able to cut that time down in the setup that I have that I'll talk about in subsequent segments. Policy-based routing is awesome, right? I've even gotten way more advanced with, you can have groups of gateways that are load balanced, you can have groups of gateways that are failover, and you can favor one connection or another in a group, apply those to a policy and say, keep this traffic with this group that favors this gateway and only switch to the other gateway if it goes down. So when we push shows, that system favors the gig link as opposed to the 150 link. So all kinds of fun stuff. Now I'll go into how to set all that up too. Actually, today I overcame some issues. SSL traffic does not like to be switched between gateways at all.
No, it doesn't.
It does not, right? And it's weird because you're looking at your logs and you're like, SSL is really the only connections that are affected when gateways start switching around. And then you do some more reading, and I'll show you how to construct some policies that can help aid that so that you don't have that issue. But it hates that. So that was pretty much where we're starting. I didn't talk about the access points. I am using Ubiquiti, Unify platforms. There's a lot of different options on there. You can do it with the cloud key or without, and I'll talk about how to set all that up because that's not really Ubiquiti's great, but their documentation and setup is not as easy as some of the other solutions that are arguably more expensive. But the software is awesome on Ubiquiti. The throughput is fantastic. They now tell you. I mean, before we used to have to set up Kismet and all these fancy wireless tools. Right in Ubiquiti, it tells you how crowded the wireless channels are.
Yep.
So it'll be yeah, there's other activity there. It doesn't say access points, but there's other 2.4 gigahertz interference from somewhere, and then you can go move it, and it changes dynamically. I'm like, that's so much easier than breaking on a laptop.
So I was actually interested in that because I think Ubiquiti is starting to definitely bring prosumer to play, right? To use the cliche word. Which I think is really interesting. I've actually got some Cisco access points in my house, but they're very much older and requires the ESX controller. And I was interested in looking at Ubiquiti because I think that might be a good replacement solution.
Yeah, the controller for Ubiquiti is just management software. The APs largely operate independently. The ones I buy are the light versions. They're like $80 for a dual radio, BG, N, and then AC, and they're $80. It's got a gig port, power over Ethernet.
Yep, I did similar. I did the Pro version with AC.
The Pro version is just more RAM and CPU, something like.
I don't know.
I think.
Either way, but it was $135, and I have one.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. I'll have to get with you guys offline and get that stuff from you because I don't like the dependency on my ESX server right now because that makes my family bitch at me when it goes down. So
and we don't want the family complaining there's no Wi-Fi. There's riots to be had.
My son is convinced that the internet is destroyed if there's no Wi-Fi.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, he's not wrong.
When I redid all the cabling and put the new AP in the house, it was actually the outdoor model with the actual physical antennas on it. And I just put it inside. Because I was like, well, there's a point at the top of my stairs on the second floor that's the perfect spot for an access point, and I can go up in the attic and literally just punch a hole through the drywall and drop a cable through. And so I put the outdoor one, but it's got antennas on it, so I get great reception. I stood underneath it with my phone, and I got 100 meg up and 100 meg down, which is my internet capacity on my phone. I was like, okay, that's working pretty good. Yeah, my job here is done, right? So.
And if it rains, it's still fine.
AC, AC is kind of worth it, right?
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to say, if it rains indoors, you're still fine.
Yeah, if the sprinkler. Well, I mean, I have 3 boys at home, so anything could happen in my house. Anything could happen.
The old sprinkle when you tinkle.
That squirt gun, garden hose, all make their way inside.
Yep. Water balloons.
Yeah, water.
Anything
exactly.
can and does happen.
Does happen. Which is nice. So. Yeah, that's the hardware that I'm working with. And again, I'm just really impressed as to the enterprise-ish kind of features that you get from all this gear. And again, you can put this together for under $1,000, have gig firewall, switching, access points, which is really pretty amazing if you're willing to put in a little work and learn how to configure it. Of course, there's other wireless systems, and Ubiquiti has its own firewall. So you can buy everything from Ubiquiti, which I've heard I've read mixed reviews. I like to go to their support page or their GitHub and look at the issues that are submitted for when they release software and see what problems people are having to kind of gauge how buggy or difficult the configuration is going to be. So, and that's how I came down to the config that we have in the show notes.
Yes.
So with that, we will take a short break, come back, talk about the security news for this week. Stay tuned.
a very fast route to piss off the kids.
Yeah, I don't want to do that though, because then all my Raspberry Pis that are up in the attic all disconnect, which arguably need to be rebuilt.
That's why you need one of these firewalls, because then you can just have a separate interface for your shit.
Yeah.
And that way, when you turn the internet off or you filter all the porn sites, you still have your internet, which is separate.
Well, technically, I still have that because I still have my old AP that I haven't migrated everything off of, and yeah.
Or you just do the
Wait,
circle.
I gotta fill up my fucking drink. Hang on, I'll be right back.
Circle with Disney.
Yeah. I heard that ended up being kind of crap.
I like it.
What is
Do
it?
you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh
no, we tried to get them on the show and they wouldn't come.
They would not talk to us, which makes it kind of feel like Apple. Like, oh yeah, we have security. You don't ask us any questions about it. We're not going to talk about it. But functionality-wise, it's nice. It's this little box sits on the network, and it basically ARP poisons and ARP spoofs to kill connections and do filtering and stuff like that.
Oh, it's like a child safety kind of.
It gives you an app, and you can set time limits, bedtimes, and filter content, which is nice.
The only problem I ever had with my kids on the internet was it was good date them, but do you remember chat roulette?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I came down one night. It's like 2 a.m. and there's my son with his friends and really not pretty sites passing by on the computer.
It was a lot of dongs.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was a lot.
I remember
of dongs.
Larry sitting there at CCDC on it.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like refreshed. Oh, there's a dong. Refreshed, another dong.
Well, the one that we used to do was we had some software that I've since deleted that would take a section of the screen and turn it into a webcam. So you fire up the browser, you go to chat roulette, and you take the camera of their camera, the part of the screen that is their camera feeding to you, and then you use that as the input sending back to them. So you're sending their own feed back to them.
It was just
so they can see their own.
It's like it's be seeing themselves.
Yeah.
So
Larry
like
likes to see 2 dongs instead of
Like,
one.
so-
I get it.
right.
That's clever.
right.
Yeah.
So if they were like sitting there spanking the monkey, like next thing you know, they're watching themselves
Spanking the
spank
monkey.
and they're like, what? And
I never forget the day I busted my kid visiting Pornhub, and I had the proxy logs, and I called him into my office. I said, "Hey kid, come here," and he's like, "What?" That's because he was a teenage boy. I said, "What is this URL?" And he goes, "Oh, damn it, Dad!" And then I'm like, "You know what? I don't give a shit. I think it's pretty cool. Thanks for the new website, but you need to explain it to your mother."
Oh no.
My
He said,
boys,
I got it off Mom's favorite links. What do you mean?
Oh.
my boys already know. Like, if you look at stuff on the internet and Dad finds it, you got to show it to Mom and explain why you're looking at it.
Okay. So I moved my camera. I moved my camera really quick to show off my Christmas holiday project up on the desk there, and that's the retro gaming system.
oh,
So-
very nice.
Oh,
Very nice.
yeah. I saw that earlier.
No more big ass speakers back there.
No, well, the big ass speakers are behind my head. Hang on,
Oh.
other way.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, they're over there still. But the retro gaming system has got like car audio amplifier in it and speakers on either side, and then the joysticks that you can see. It was kind of a combination Raspberry Pi and woodworking project.
Nice.
Hey, Joff, no playing with your joystick when we're doing the show, okay?
Okay, I'll try not to play with my
No promises.
Yeah.
No promise. That's right, no promises.
All right, we're ready.
For the record, I did add stuff to the show notes.
Sweet.
Hello, my name is John Strand with Black Hills Information Security, and I'm a customer of Scythe, and I wanted to tell you why we are customers of Scythe. Whenever you're doing a red team, a penetration test, or any type of offensive security test, and you're doing it correctly, it requires a massive amount of testing post-exploitation. In particular, mapping those things over to the MITRE ATT&CK technique. What Scythe allows us to do is to automate a tremendous amount of those activities so we can get them done quickly instead of doing them manually. And we can get on to research and development and actually tuning our assessments specifically for our customers. So check out scythe.io.
To
find out more about Scythe, visit scythe.io/securityweekly. Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @thinkstcanary on Twitter. Domain tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement. We're going to Disney World. Woo! After that technical segment, we decided we're going to... No. Disney's Contemporary Resort will be home to InfoSec World April 1st through the 3rd. You can go to infosecworld.misty.com. Use the registration code OS19-SecWeek. 15% off the main conference or World Pass. Again, if you'd like to do a free analyst briefing with us or a paid interview or both, go to securityweekly.com/conference request. And now the security news. I want to start with Patrick's story.
Oh, boy.
About how the teen who hacked Apple macOS won't tell them why, which I think is
interesting,
ironic.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of neat that it seems as though Apple doesn't have a bug bounty program for Mac OS. So this hacker kid decided that he said he's not telling anybody. He says he's not releasing the exploit code. He showed it to another Mac researcher, I guess, who could then confirm it. But he wants to make sure that Apple is going to get people paid for when people find exploits for them. And it's kind of funny, like in the article, he refers to somebody else that was found a bounty or found a bug on a Sony product, and at least Sony gave him a T-shirt. So he kind of comments like, at least Sony gives you a T-shirt for hacking them, whereas Apple for Mac OS has given him nothing. So he's holding out, and who knows if he is actually holding out, where he's going to be selling that exploit to, but he's not telling Apple how he did it.
I love this kid. We gotta bring this guy on the show.
He's in Germany, I think.
It doesn't matter where he's
So
from.
what? Bring him on the show.
It doesn't matter. What is that? What do we? Germany is like our #2 country that listens to this show. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Germans love us and we love Germans. It doesn't matter where he's from. This kid's awesome for being like, you know what, Apple? I'm not telling you.
Maybe he's a listener and he's gonna contact you.
It's so awesome.
Can I jump in on a quick segue?
Yeah.
While on Germany topic. Mm-hmm. I am teaching SANS Sec 573 in Munich, Germany, coming up.
What was that about? An infomercial, Jeff, earlier?
Yeah, it was. I mean,
while you're over there, Jeff,
Germany's
find this kid and talk him into coming on the show.
Right, that's right. Look, Python skills are probably the most valuable InfoSec skill you could have today. I would count it as, and I'm not just a marketing infomercial here. I would count it as one of the core essential skills that everybody should gain if they can.
And now, for a special offer, you get 2 seats for the price of 1.
But wait, there's more.
You have to pay shipping and handling, but
and you get to meet Joff.
You get to meet me, which is such a pleasure.
Do we know this person's name that won't tell Apple? Because I have a whole newfound respect for this person now. I've been reading the story. Linus Heinz? H-E, help me out.
Hens.
Linus Hens. He's awesome.
You should offer him a T-shirt to come on the show.
I give him a T-shirt and a sticker to come on the show. How about that?
Linus, if you can show up to my course.
That's right.
There we go.
We'll make a remote call, bring him on. I think that's
Automating
great.
information security. In fact, I promise you I will give you a free T-shirt if you show up. It may not be the one. It may not be the one that Paul's talking about.
Right. Well, get you a T-shirt. But so Linus is hitting on two things that really annoy me, and I think a lot of other people in the security community about Apple. And that's one, they are so tight-lipped. I mean, they control information, not just about products and other things, but about security especially. It's very... Linus is absolutely right in this case. Anyway, that was cool. Where do we want to go next?
To Disney.
Since we're talking about big companies and what we don't like about them, why don't we jump up to the Amazon article?
Good point, Jeff. I think, pirating or stealing of intellectual property, and certainly in this way, is like one of the most slimy things that we come across. And especially now that technology has enabled us or enabled the evildoers to pull this off, it's just terrible. Jeff, give our audience some background.
Let me frame it a little bit. So the other day on Twitter, I happened to see a tweet from Bill Pollock, who runs No Starch Press. He was posting some pictures of apparently a quote-unquote no-starch press book that he had found on Amazon that actually wasn't a no-starch press book. And so he was talking about how it's a counterfeit. The article that's in the show notes is an article that's about this exact problem, but it's written back in 2017. As near as I can figure out, and I spent like an hour, in an Amazon chat trying to get the answer to the question. But, basically Amazon has this service called CreateSpace where you can self-publish. And what I haven't been able to figure out yet, so I would defer to anybody from Amazon that could set all of us straight. I don't know what Amazon does to vet any content that people try to self-publish through CreateSpace. What they do offer is if you're a publisher or if you're an author and you go out to Amazon and see stuff that's not yours, they have this big, long process that you have to go through to identify it. Buy a copy of the book or whatever it is, and check the ISBN number, and basically you have to submit all sorts of proof to Amazon that what they're selling isn't yours. And so the sort of the burden of proof is on the victim. And presumably if you discover that, if you prove it to Amazon, they'll be happy to take it down for you. Nothing about any, lost revenue, royalties on anything that's been purchased that should have gone to the rightful author and owner. So the mild stink that's been stirred up on Twitter a little bit is that Amazon apparently doesn't own any responsibility for vetting or validating content that they're publishing and then turning around and selling through Amazon, whether it's valid or real or this is really the author that they're dealing with. And again, I haven't talked to anybody at Amazon that can say, oh, well, this is what we do, this is our process, and it's good, bad, or indifferent. So I'll throw it out to the group here. What do you think? But mostly just trying to raise awareness, because we have a sizable community that hopefully can raise enough of the noise level that maybe Amazon will respond and at least comment on what seems to be a practice where they sort of distance themselves from any kind of responsibility for first publishing or producing and then selling counterfeit materials.
It seems to be it's kind of behind the, they're definitely behind the eight ball on this. YouTube had the same problem for a long time, other content aggregators. And the burden of proof has decided YouTube will do that himself. They'll do copyright algorithms on audio. They'll do it on video.
And their copyright algorithms today, Harry, are... Well,
they suck because they're a pain when you want to. You just want to have. Right.
Yeah, I mean, they are like really aggressive. Yeah, like if there is any, being a content creator for 14 years, right? I've noticed YouTube is just like gone. If there's anything that's copyrighted in there,
right, they'll stop.
We had music that we created, Like, we mixed it, created it ourselves.
But it sounded like something else.
And it got flagged for copyright. I'm like, how is that even? So they really err on the side of caution. And I think it's probably in YouTube's or Google's best interest to do that, right?
Whereas it sounds like Amazon is sort of
the opposite.
And it's taking the approach YouTube took once upon a time. If you go pre-Google and back in time, they were like, "Look, this is not our problem.
Yeah.
It's whoever published it's problem. We're just posting it."
Which that kind of makes sense, since in the YouTube example, everything's on the YouTube platform. Whereas with Amazon, there's times when you can order something through the Amazon website,
right?
But you're, as the buyer, interacting with somebody working out of their garage,
right?
And it's just that Amazon advertised it, and you are the purchasing through them, but Amazon never touches the thing. Whereas with YouTube, everything's on their platform; they see everything.
Yeah.
Well, these books, Jeff, were being purchased from Amazon.
These books are being purchased by Amazon, and they kind of look like, well, they say No Starch Press on them, but No Starch Press didn't print them, or they weren't their books.
Yep.
And apparently this has been going on for 17, 18, 19, 3 years. Bill Pollock has been trying to get Amazon to do something about it, and apparently he, as a publisher, is not getting any kind of communication with Amazon, yet alone any kind of satisfactory communication from Amazon. So again, I try to be fair, and I've been trying to investigate and find out, well, what does Amazon do here? Surely they must do something, but I haven't found anything yet. I got transferred. For a while, I swore I was talking to a bot. Which
you were.
I was.
It was Alexa,
and I got transferred 3 or 4 times, and it seemed like I was finally talking to a live person. But every once in a while you'd get that weird response, because I said something at one point about this is outrageous or something like that, and the response was well, we're really sorry about that. And I'm like, wow, you sound like our government after a mass shooting. And I was expecting them to pray for me the next thing, but I spent an hour on chat, and all I got was, here's this big long procedure of basically, if you're the publisher or you're the author, here's all the 20 steps you have to follow in order to try to prove that something we're selling isn't yours. Burden of proof is on you. Go. We don't care. I don't know what that middle ground is, what Amazon's doing in terms of caring or vetting. You would think that it's a big enough problem that there's enough authors, publishers out there that, maybe they have to band together. And another question for you, is there an alternative to selling your books on Amazon? I don't know if No Starch Press has a viable option to try to sell their books somewhere else, because I'm sure our community would gladly not buy from Amazon. They would go buy, somewhere else. Obviously, you can go to conferences where they have a booth and buy them.
Bill has his own e-commerce site.
He does.
Does he?
He does, and that's the only place I've ever bought No Starch books. And largely because if he's at a conference, he'll often gives out discount codes and those types of things, and that's the only place you can.
But he makes more money selling them himself than through Amazon, because you pay fees through.
But you're still going to have that majority of 90% of the population. Even if they would go to his site, they're going to go to Amazon first.
But it's one of those. If I can't buy it on Amazon, I don't buy it.
Now, that's a great segue into another story that I had about publishing porn on the internet. Actually, it's the same concept.
Yeah.
And a lot of sites, and the whole thing is basically, as sites get larger and have to appeal to a larger audience, they have to take content at the lowest common denominator. And so what you're seeing now is, as these sites get much bigger and bigger and bigger, all of a sudden they're like, yeah, adult content, you're gone. What was it? Tumblr was the one that did that, right?
Yep.
And as a content creator, we've dealt with this similar issue. It's a similar issue to Amazon, although that is a legal issue with copyrights, of course, which, again, we had to defer to our legal team on that one to comment.
Porn is copyrighted.
Porn, it is copyrighted.
Not that I know from personally.
It is copyrighted, but the whole thing is about the freedom of speech, and also the level of access that your content can achieve based on a corporation making a decision. if Amazon makes a decision that we're not going to police the materials, copyrighted or not, in our bookstore, then what are your alternatives? If Tumblr says we're not going to allow pornography anymore, where do you put your content if it's somehow deemed as pornography? And let's draw the line. Some things are obviously pornography. If you read the article in the show notes, there are things that are, documentaries about sexuality or whatever, things that arguably could cross the line from the corporation's perspective providing the service. And they're just like, look, there's younger people on our network, so therefore anything that's even close, you're out. And that doesn't give those people the same voice. It doesn't give Bill from No Starch as big of an audience. It doesn't give anyone who's publishing content that could be adult material. Look, we fell victim to this, right? And they won't tell us why the content was flagged and
so
put
your
under
porn
restriction.
videos were taken down, Paul?
No, they were not porn, but I don't know if they were believed to be
In
porn.
someone's eye.
Our show, one of our shows, called Hack Naked News. It's different, themes. Was it that? Right. I don't know. Was it the fact that, and the real reason that I think I bring this up on the show is, what if it is about hacking material? What if the major publishers, YouTube, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, go, yeah, that hacking stuff, that's really, we can't have that. Like, younger kids are going to see that and they're going to be breaking and stuff
It's like
all over the place.
bomb-making materials.
Yeah, like we're not allowing that as content on our network. We have a show on cigars. We suffered from this years ago as a cigar podcast. I'm not selling tobacco. I don't have a license to sell tobacco, nor do I care to have a license to sell tobacco in the state of Rhode Island, because it's a huge pain in the ass and not what we want to do as a business. However, because I am the Stogie Geek Show, I am not allowed to take out an advertisement on Facebook. I can't. Every time I did, it would get denied until I just stopped and was like...
Because it's tobacco related.
It's tobacco related. Tobacco-ish, right?
Yeah, enterprise-ish. It's tobacco. I think a lot of it, when we struggle with this morally, it's a size issue. If I was an indie publisher and I just wanted to do, look, I'm going to publish.
Yeah, you publish whatever you want, right?
And nobody would say boo if I said, you know what, I'm not publishing anything that has the word naked in it. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
But Amazon is we no longer think of it as just, it's a private company doing a niche business. It's the place. If you're not there, you don't exist, kind of thing.
Right, exactly.
And it's the same with Twitter or Tumblr or anything. Where do you draw the line? And all of a sudden, now you actually have a society responsibility as opposed to a private corporation make your own choices.
It's very scary to me. And you wonder how long places like Reddit and other avenues like that are going to remain as open as they do. Because it is, if you look at Reddit and you read the articles about Reddit, it's a double-edged sword, right? So there's people talking about security and technology. There's people talking about cigars. There's pornography. There's also hate groups that are using Reddit and terrorists. So, and Reddit has made the decision that like everything's open, it's an open environment. Now, in support of free speech, I understand that, but free as in, okay, now there's hate groups on there, pedophiles, whatever. That could be a problem.
Look, the same thing happened, what is it, Gab versus Twitter. So if you're upset that Twitter enforces certain rules and responsibilities and you can't say certain things, so then you flock to Gab, but then it also attracted basically all of the extremes. So yes, it became this free platform. Reddit does as well, but it also became a magnet for... It's the
scum of the earth.
It's the part of the neighborhood you just don't want to walk through.
Right.
I'm glad that anybody can live there, but I don't want to live there anymore.
So the major corporations get to determine what is in the gutter scum of the earth and what is good and where that line is, right? Like books on hacking now all of a sudden are going to like the bad side, and someone else is making that decision.
The moment they draw any line, it doesn't matter what the line is. The moment they draw any line, there's going to be this left out niche. And they have to decide, do I go with the gutter people? What are those people that live underground? The Morlocks? Or I go with
a lot of movies have that underground.
Morlock.
Right. What was the one with Sylvester Stallone? What was that one?
Oh, not the future one.
The seashells?
Yeah.
The underground people. It's actually a good...
It's actually Sandra Bullock.
Yeah,
Sandra Bullock,
it's
Sylvester
actually a
Stallone.
good analogy to what we're talking about. The society above the ground was this utopian society where you couldn't swear and the whole thing, and the underground society wanted freedom, but they were as we're deeming it, the scum of the
Right.
earth.
They were the scum of the earth.
Well,
And
it sounds like The Matrix, too, for that matter.
Sorta. Well, but what was that movie? Now, we've described the entire
Somebody go to IMDb
Demolition?
and look it up.
not Demolition. Man.
Demolition
That was
Man.
with the. Oh wait, Sylvester Stallone was with, what's
he
that other
was
guy's
with
name?
the other actor who was into cigars that we had on a
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
cigar show.
No.
There's another.
While you're pondering this, let me say that there's an
Look at it, without
irony in
Google
all
in front of me,
this
this-
when all these companies
Wesley Snipes.
seem to forget that pornography
in that,
kind of
yes.
built the internet. And for many years, pornography was the only industry that was even making money on the internet. Amazon probably being the one company that emerged, or the first company that emerged. But I mean, I remember doing physical penetration testing of data centers back in the 97, 98-ish time frame, and when once we identified who we were and we're getting the tour, back in the old days when data centers were actually filled with racks with blade servers and so on and so forth, they were saying, oh, every this row, it's all porn. We had to walk through what seemed like miles of racks before we got to our customer back in a corner.
So one of the ones was, sorry, Jeff, but it was.
I was stalling so you could find
Thank you.
the
Judge Dredd was
Judge
the one
Dredd.
that I was
Judge
thinking.
Dredd,
It's not. That's not the one. That's the one
And the other
where.
one's Demolition Man.
Yeah, the other one's different. So Judge Dredd was Armand Assante, who I thought of because he also had a cigar. Armand's in the cigar industry with his own cigar, and from everything I've heard, he's a really nice guy.
Right, but the Seashells, just to be clear, that was Wesley Snipes.
Seashells was Demolition Man 1993 with Wesley Snipes and Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one where the utopian society is above ground, and then there's the underground society.
But the point still remains. You start
Yes.
setting any line, and it doesn't matter where. Even if we all agree as a society, that's a good line to set. Yeah, I'm not going to have bomb-making material, but there's going to be that line's going to move a little bit, and everybody outside of it's going to have to flock somewhere else. And either you end up with an indie business, or you end up with the Morlocks or the Dredge.
Yep, that was exactly back in the day when I was doing the metadata research on images.
Yes.
We were pulling them down from Twitter and analyzing the metadata. And then Twitter said, or TwitPic, because Twitter wasn't hosting the images themselves, it was TwitPic that was doing it because there was a need for the service. TwitPic says, "Yep, nope, we have a no porn clause. You can't host your porn here." So 3 other services popped up and said, "Hey, come share your stuff here."
Right.
So,
But if you read about the types of content and the people that are impacted, it's not necessarily the people that are producing clearly
Right.
porn, right? It's people who have
It's artists. A lot of the Tumblr people were just artists who do
an erotic,
risque,
erotic photos,
Yep.
burlesque, or whatever.
whatever it is. And again, the corporation's the one making the
Yep.
decisions around that.
yeah, I have, for example, this is going to sound weird, but I follow a person on Instagram
Nothing
that
you
does.
could say to me at this point, Larry.
Did something sound
Would
weird on
sound
this
yeah.
show?
weird.
that does cosplay.
Yeah.
And she has amazing stuff for cosplay, but part of the way that she makes a living is through Patreon.
Yes. That was in
And-
the article.
Yep.
And by that Patreon stuff is that she does boudoir and lewd photography of her in all of these cosplay costumes.
Sure.
And she posts the notifications to Instagram and will put a picture of her in her costume and a bra. And her Instagram account gets flagged and taken down time and time again.
If I had my obviously I don't control Twitter or Instagram any of those. I'd rather much prefer the two options that you can say. One is these are sensitive materials, so you have an extra click through, but it lets you or look if you want to have just like Google Safe Search, if you want to have a safe Instagram that uses whatever algorithms they want, you have that, but that the platform's still free. If an adult chooses, hey, you know what, I want to see hacking materials, I want to see boudoir, I want to see bomb.
It's like the evil bit, sort of.
Yeah.
But that's sort of a twist on the Amazon thing, because you're suggesting an opt-in or opt-out, and those companies are going to be concerned with the minors, let's say,
That are going to opt in to see the porn.
that are
right?
going to
Yeah.
opt in, and is it still a liability for the big company? And they don't want to take that on, type of thing.
Although most adult content hosting things, I don't know how, at least whether it's legal or not, but the lawyers always have the button, click here if you
Yeah.
are 18 or older. I don't know if that passes muster, but I don't know of many sites that have been sued by parents of 16-year-olds that or even 10-year-olds that accidentally got to something.
The other interesting thing is with Apple Podcasts, they have not. I mean, they've enforced the explicit tag, over time, certainly.
Right.
Largely, I have not heard about them like getting serious about filtering content. Like largely, they're taking the Reddit approach to podcasts. And dear God, let's hope that continues, right?
Now,
but it's audio as well, right? So there's no images or video when you're listening to a podcast.
Out.
So not only is it hard to filter, but I guess there's a moral compass of if people listen to words versus viewing pictures or images,
also,
different
look,
things.
What if you're interviewing a guy named Dick? And it's just, hey, Dick.
And again, I don't pretend to know how they were policing it.
Right. And like, what happens if you ask him for a pic? I mean,
but the copyright issue is a little different because that's
different. That's a legal issue.
That's a legal issue, right? Versus moral lines, even legality aside, moral lines are tough ones, but copyright is copyright.
Absolutely.
And I do think if you're hosting and/or you're the third party providing that access, you have some liability, even if you're just a third party connector.
To me, that's a lawyer question, Harry. Though. Intellectual property law, as you probably well know, owning a business, right, is tricky stuff. And so who is responsible and what level of I think it's more a question of what level of responsibility do they have. It also, I think, in this country comes down to who can afford the better lawyers.
Well, and who's well, I'm going to actually put it the other way. It comes down to this country, who's most likely gets sued. You think this generic guy who's selling this copyright book is going to get sued? He's got no money. Amazon's going to get
yes.
So,
yeah, you're right.
So it's in their interest to put money behind it.
And that's probably why Google
and
decided with YouTube to
It might take, in Amazon's instance, a class action suit where a bunch of independent publishers and authors somehow band together because what Paul said is true. It's the ones that can afford the best lawyers tend to win.
And I'm glad we talked about it. So the security community can support Bill and No Starch Press, who Bill is
buy directly from No Starch Press. Don't get your No Starch Press books from Amazon, please.
And Bill is a nice guy. He's an honest guy making an honest living. As far as I can tell, having interacted with him and hearing everyone talk about it, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about Bill in the community. Again, honest guy making an honest living, just trying to make sure no one's ripping off his copyrighted stuff. And if we can help raise awareness about that and help influence that in any way, I think it's positive. So, Jeff, thank you.
Bill and No Starch are amazing. And if you're at RSA and you can get invited to the No Starch party if they're doing one this year, I highly recommend you go. And everybody there was absolutely fantastic.
There is one, and we're invited. Paul.
So
excellent. And if you get the book, I can promise you no inappropriate pictures are going to be in there. So you really don't have anything to worry about there.
I mean, unless they have a picture, like a screenshot of Emacs or something, and then I'd question.
Stop it. We had this discussion. I'm an Emacs guy. You're a VI.
Right, you are an
I'm an Emacs guy, and you just blasphemed me. You would be banned from my
let's
platform.
move along now.
I feel so triggered right now.
Paul's got a VI in the screenshot in his book. Get it out. We're not publishing it.
That is totally correct, though. Emacs is a dirty fucking word.
Wow. That's it. Triggered beyond the... I'm going to Tumblr with my editor.
I mean, I bloated over... Oh, anyway.
Oh, boy. Wow. All right.
Hey, let's
avoid
talk
the whole...
about vulnerabilities in containers. That's a fun one.
It's we've talked about this on various shows. Inside the container, you can exploit vulnerabilities in Run C, which essentially, this is the first widely publicized bug I've seen in terms of a container escape.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there have been other ones. I'm just going to say that. Containers are a newer technology. It's evolved. Not everyone has been looking, but I have somewhat inside information that tells me it's not the first.
Arguably, there's been container escape, but it's largely due to misconfiguration on those containers.
Sure. Absolutely.
Isn't it always?
Yeah. But so apparently this article was run, and it's touted as how to defend against it. And basically, they've identified the modification of both the containers bin sh and the host's user bin docker-run-nc. And if you can do that, then you can detect it. And I'm like, there's a lot of ways you could detect that with a lot of solutions, likely open source and commercial, to detect if someone's messing with your binary, right? I think Harry, even you talked about that. You would detect that in.
There's a lot. That's the whole point. If you're going to mess with the binary, there are ways to detect this. It does show, though, what we were saying before. Container isn't an invulnerable thing.
Oh yeah.
Even if it's misconfiguration, because one of the things people think is, oh, I'll just take this stock container off the shelf, this image, and then I'll put my thing in there. It's not misconfiguration; it's poisoned images.
Right. It's either poisoned images or still all of the same things apply for configuring systems. It's a system. It's just a smaller system that it still requires quote host-based firewalls, but you're not running a host-based firewall, so you have to do it within the container infrastructure, and you have to do principal of least privilege. Like, we did some testing not that long ago about some containers that you could get access to the command prompt within the container through a Jupyter Notebook, and you type you type sudo,
and your root. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just Linux.
It's like
so Linux binary running on top of the kernel at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it's an IDS running in a Lua script under Emacs, and then it's not Linux at all.
Emacs is totally secure. It never happens.
Because no one uses it.
Because no one uses it.
Sorry, I had to go there again.
You did.
Yeah, go back to using your mouse and your color-coded editors.
What? You use a mouse in an editor? I mean,
what?
Yeah,
it requires you
GI
to
was not
RAM to use your editor?
All right, we'll cover another Linux vulnerability so that we can somehow segue that into the Emacs VI Holy War as well. Oh, snap! Snap. I don't use the Snap package management. Is that right? Is that what it's some kind?
Snapd. I have what?
It's Snapd is Canonical's open source toolkit for packaging and running applications via systemd.
Fucking systemd.
Always systemd.
Yeah.
Say no more.
Systemd's worse than Emacs.
I was going to. Can we at least agree on that? Like, you're right about VI, but systemd is worse than Emacs.
I agree with that. I agree with that. We somehow need T-shirts that promote init or something, or like bring back init. I don't know. We need some kind of T-shirt for us to wear and express our discontent for systemd.
It's easy. It's just a few words. Where'd my fucking init script go? They just put that on the front of the shirt.
It would get filtered out of almost any online store if you say that.
I mean, if you're running containers, you don't have the systemd problem because systemd doesn't run inside of containers. But
What was the T-shirt that I saw the other day that could be adapted to that? It was systemd. I just baked you some shut the fuck up cakes.
So no one's looking in this Snap. No one's using Snap.
No.
Snapd, no.
Snapd or Snap for package. It's the second time it's come up on one of our shows.
No. Packaging, yeah.
But then we stopped drinking so much, and it didn't come up again.
Yeah. So let's put it this way: if I was going to be packaging and running applications via systemd, I'd do it on my own because the framework is there. It's fairly simple to do. I have done it, not by choice because I want my init scripts back.
Snap is a way to create packages
that will launch via systemd. So it creates that framework so you can do like systemd package stuff.
Oh yeah, gotcha. To start and stop and restart.
Yeah, so you create that framework so you can just call systemd to do it.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
On a lighter note,
go ahead, Jeff.
We were I forget what we were talking about last week, but I said something about I wish I could still be running Windows 95. One of our loyal listeners tweeted me, and there's actually an app out there that's available for Windows 10, Linux, and Mac where you can emulate Windows 95. So I'm rummaging through boxes trying to find my old Zork CDs so I can get that thing up and running.
Oh, I'm so connecting that thing to the internet and see what the survivability rate is.
Yeah, that's right. See how long it takes to fall over dead.
It's so obsolete, I don't even think anybody's going to touch it. They'll just be like, I'm not going to it.
I think it'll be by accident. It's going to receive packets today and be like, I don't know what that is, and crash.
Well, I don't want crash. I want compromise.
Long live the ping of death, baby.
I don't think we're stable enough to be
literally
compromised.
all it has to do is connect it.
It's not. It's an app that runs it. It's an emulator.
Oh,
for what it's worth.
Well,
it's emulated.
Oh, it's not actually running a packaged version of Windows 95 it
No,
emulates.
they wrote Windows 95 into an emulator application.
Oh.
Follow the link; it's in the show notes.
Oh wait, so you don't like actually get the Windows 95?
No, it's not like
was
you're
it even a
creating
CD?
virtual
There was
image.
a CD, not a floppy. There was both back then, right? CD and a floppy of Windows 95.
Can you get Microsoft Bob to work on it? Get Clippy.
That would be awesome.
Because that would be, that would bring back the classics. Kind of put it on that gaming console.
Bring back the classics.
See, when I need to punish my kids, I'm gonna be like, look, now all you have to use is Windows 95 with Microsoft Bob. All right, this is what we had back in the day. This is what you have now. And they'd be like, where's the home button? How do I install apps? What is going on?
This is great. It even comes with front page.
Oh,
How do I get to the internet?
If you want to install an app, you got to reboot. Like, what is that?
Right,
I never
exactly.
turn my iPad off. What are you talking about? There was a USB cable with an embedded Wi-Fi controller into it. When plugged into Linux, Mac, or Windows, the cable is detected as a hid device, and those it actually sets up a command and control channel off of a Wi-Fi PCB.
So this is
straight up your alley.
This is bad USB. Mm-hmm. Those bad USB cables with the additional Wi-Fi chipsets, so you can connect to the bad USB cable and get your
How
command control.
big is the? It must be a tiny Wi-Fi chipset.
It is tiny. It is a standard cable. It doesn't look any different than any other cable.
And it still functions like a cable?
It functions like a cable.
So it'll still pass power and data to the connected device?
It will do power and data to the connected device.
And show up as a hid device?
And show up as a hid device.
And give you
and
access.
will power Wi-Fi to create a Wi-Fi access point and so forth and so on.
It's actually some pretty amazing engineering.
It's amazing.
I mean, just
I was going to say
security ramifications aside, like that's pretty amazing.
Right. We don't know if we'd be amazed or outraged.
Terrified. Yep. So Kevin Mitnick's company
Oh yeah, okay.
was the
Cool.
one
Okay.
that did the bad USB stuff, and I don't know where this is on the evolution.
I remember reading some of Kevin's posts on that. It was
Yep. But this is effectively
he had to
it's
seek
the
out
evolution
some
of that.
serious engineering to
Yes.
like a lot of people when he brought that idea. From what I gathered from reading, I think on LinkedIn, some of his posts was people were like, "Yeah, that's not possible." Like he had to go find some people that could really do it.
It's like, yeah, it is.
Yep. and yeah, it's also with Kevin's company's cable. The idea wasn't his idea, but he quote perfected the implementation, as it were, and he shares my understanding. He shares all of that profit and credit with the folks that actually developed bad USB. But it's amazing.
A lot of things aren't truly unique. Well,
Right.
Josh Wright has a presentation on this. I talk about aspects of it in some of my talks. Is basically drawing on Josh's inspiration.
Yep. The one that's awesome is that with that bad USB cable, it functions. It does its activity. It injects all of its code for establishing command and control and exploit, and you name it, unless you present a rare earth magnet to the device, and then it puts it in programming mode.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really? That's how they trigger it because it has no other inputs.
Right. So if you want to program it, you put the magnet on it, and it goes into programming mode, and you can update it and do all your stuff. And it puts
It's even more amazing, right?
I mean, remember that the days, well, wasn't that long ago, you just drop USB sticks in a parking lot, people pick them up, insert them, they're screwed. Now it's a USB cable. And you got to and what you do is you got to put the sort of the 5 different Apple adapters at the end because people gobble those up like they're, chocolate.
Yeah, right.
Anybody will plug those in. Oh, I got to get that on my machine.
Well, because I think we've raised a lot of awareness around, like, don't plug your phone into random ports in the airport or in a kiosk, right? But there's not a lot of awareness today about you got to make sure you're aware of what cable you're using to charge.
No, I don't think we do. People do it all the time. And within the security community, you won't see us plugging into the airport, but those
we
cords
have
are
our
there
own
for-
battery
Right.
packs and
The size of
physical plugging into the wall outlet in our own cables and all that stuff.
But I don't think that's a generalized sentiment. Most society, that's why everywhere you go, there are more of these power and plug stations.
right,
People are not sensitized to the dangers of cables.
because everyone's traveling. Most people likely travel with a phone and a tablet, right? That need to be charged.
Yeah, always need to be charged their phones.
And for a while, people didn't know. I'd break out a battery pack, and people would be like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's a it's a bad. You've never been to a security conference and had to charge your phone? Like you can't get through a conference without one of these things.
You ever go, when they first came out, go through airport security with them, and they'd flag in your backpack or your carry-on and be like, "What's this?"
Now they have them at every convenience store, right?
Yep. I have
I
four of
don't
them in my
know.
bag now. Like
You try going through airport security with like a 26,000 milliamp battery pack. That'd be like, hold on a minute.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
I actually had that problem last time I was coming out of Europe. I had the big ass Anker battery pack, which will charge my MacBook Pro.
Yep.
It is badass. But the Germans didn't really like that too much.
It's SeaTac also didn't like a suitcase full of wood and knives. Ironically,
This is the knife make right. The problems that we just don't have.
yeah,
Right?
exactly. And I've never done this before. I actually had to pay for overweight bags, for 2 overweight bags. Coming back from Seattle today, or yesterday.
It's all blur at this point.
Yeah, my hard-sided case was 54 pounds.
Oh.
And the guy checking my bag, he's like, if you can move 4 pounds to the other bag, I'm like, no.
Not doing it.
Put the other bag up. The other bag was 62 pounds.
See, but you would have been better off doing that and paying only one overweight. They don't average it out.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, Mike.
It's so the same amount of weights going on the never
On the
mind.
plane.
Never, you know what? No, let's not go there.
Yep. No, it's about because the person has to carry it, and it's their medical insurance or something, maybe.
Yeah.
Giving them the
So
benefit.
I've encountered that for years because every time I've been in and out of Australia, they're very, very particular about that. They'll get you. You know, if it's over 26 kilograms or whatever, it's like, that's it. Buy another bag. You know, whatever. I have actually bought bags at the airport just to come home. So
It's like, dude, I'm going to go have a cheeseburger. That's going to put me way over the weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't do that on people yet. Not yet.
No.
This article was kind of interesting. The 10 quotes to get your boss to take IT security seriously. I don't know if anyone else read the article, but I liked this one. Out of all 10, I read all 10. And this quote says, one of the tests of leadership is the ability to recognize a problem before it becomes an emergency. Arnold H. Glasgow, author and businessman.
nice.
I don't know if it's the most prolific security quote ever, but out of the 10, that was my favorite. The rest of them were kind of like stuff we kind of knew. But.
You know, I feel like we should invoke PCI at this point. Cue Jeff.
Interesting segue, Joff. Are you
Go
just
ahead,
checking?
Joff. I made it this far without mentioning it.
Are we just talking about it just to check the box?
Compliance is security.
You better believe it, man. We checked the Emacs box already.
To me, this quote was something right out of, it conjured up memories of, the Phoenix Project, about unplanned work, right? How that relates to security, your ability as a leader to get ahead of problems before they become serious problems in emergencies. And I thought it was great.
Because it sounds like what he's saying really is the old an ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. Mm-hmm. Like, let's get a hold of it and make sure that we can head off any kind of problems before they're going to happen.
Technical debt, I think, certainly plays into this quote. I think it's one of the reasons my favorite is there's a lot of different ways you could go, go and interpret it.
Our head of engineering, Tom Hickman, likes to say turning knowledge into negligence. Mm-hmm. So which is basically once you're aware of the problem, whatever it is, if you don't take action, you're now negligent.
Right.
So part of how do you improve something, you simply provide knowledge. Mm-hmm. Now it's up to management at that point. It's negligent if they don't take action.
Right.
I think my favorite quote from that article, Paul, the best way to get management excited about a disaster plan is to burn down the building across the street.
Yeah.
From Dan Irwin, security officer, Dow Chemical.
Yeah.
How many companies learned about disaster recovery after September 11th?
A lot.
A lot. I remember going to a presentation down in New York City where they were talking about, like, we were lucky because our stuff was here, and we see all the issues that they had because their stuff was in the towers, and it's like all that was gone. So that's how they realized, like, we need to put stuff in multiple places.
Along those lines, did you see the VF email?
Yeah,
it was an email service, and they broke it, and they basically went on a seek and destroy mission.
Yep.
And started deleting backups, deleting VMs, all of the US based infrastructure. They were just deleting it. And to the point where a lot of it's not going to come back, according to the founder of the company.
It will never come back. It's gone. It is destroyed. And my understanding was the greater majority of their infrastructure, all of their virtual machines had shared credentials across the board.
Interesting.
What was the motivation behind it? Do they know?
I couldn't glean that from any of the. Did you glean that from any of the articles? That was my question, Harry, and I couldn't figure it out.
And I think the big one is that without any sort of evidence, you'll never be able to determine motive unless someone claims responsibility.
Right. No, and these are the ones that people don't, because you think, okay, well, I don't have anything of value or whatever. It's the destructive attacks. Was the one that happened, Aramco, where they wiped out the machines. Those are the ones that teach you lessons. Because even if you think, well, I don't have anything, or I don't have anything, a lot of the blanked out on the term.
Bitcoin?
Yeah, no,
cryptocurrency.
Not crypto. That's where my tongue is going. Too many damn limoncellos. Where crypto hijacking? No, that's the cryptocurrency. Where they encrypt your whole hard drive.
Oh, ransomware. Yeah.
Thank you.
You
no
did
more
have too
limoncello.
much limoncello.
But that, which
Emacs.
is, they're not. It's, you know what? Emacs can't be encrypted. It's totally every file I access.
It's immune to any kind of ransomware.
It's totally immune to ransomware.
I use
Challenge accepted.
I PGP encrypted my Emacs files all the time.
Yeah, but
it
is a denial of service attack, though.
It begs the question in today's, technological world, how do we protect the backups? I mean, before, let's talk back in the day for a moment for the youngsters out there, right? We had, our safe was Iron Mountain. Now, say what you will about the company, and I'm sure we could say a lot of things, but let's not go there. But anyway, there were services, right? You made a backup to a physical tape. That physical tape was then taken off-site and put in secure storage. I mean, it depended on your provider. I'm trying to say this without laughing because we've all heard, stories about
it was put in off-site storage.
It was put in off-site storage.
With some modicum of security.
Yes. And so an attack would have to enter into the physical world and know what you're going after to go get at your backups, right? And, of course, there was a thing where it's not really a backup unless you've tested it.
That's so true.
I mean, Joff, right? I mean, we all know someone or maybe are that person that thought the backups were good. They were stored off site. You put in I used to have to fill out like a request on a piece of paper to go retrieve that tape, and it would come back maybe same day, maybe next day, right?
Right. But now
you put it in and go, that tape's blank, or it doesn't work, or it's not the right or like I didn't actually get a backup, right?
We worry about backups, but how many people ever actually successfully backed up anything?
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, any recovered a backup.
Right. And so, but how do we protect in today's world when we have containers, whatever applications? How do we protect it? How do we put the trust in place in all these different scenarios to make sure that if someone gets in, that they can't modify a backup or delete a backup?
Well, a lot of times, by the way, the technique's a little simpler than that. Is you go in, you infect whatever you're infecting, you lay low for a couple weeks.
And let it back up.
Let it back up. You're going to back, because how many people keep 6 months, 2 years worth of backups?
Right.
Or even if they knew how to roll back that far.
Right,
And so that's enough. Then whatever attack you execute. They restore the backup, you do it again.
Yep.
And again, and again, and again.
I have seen some technologies, and they weren't really backups. It was more for logging and incident response and forensics that, there was a segment on the show. It was Waterfall Security. Basically took their ICS security device that had that physical, like one-way connection. Like, so there was one way in. Physically, the diodes wouldn't let it out. They applied that to logging so that the logs could only flow one way, and it was serial, right? Like the logs would get written, you couldn't overwrite what had already passed through the device. That's the only similar thing I've seen.
The blockchain of backups.
It's essentially
I have to say blockchain.
Similar. You have to say PCI blockchain. We're Emacs VI. We're on a roll. We're on a roll.
Containers,
AI, and machine learning enabled as well. It's very important
and
that
containers.
we have
in containers,
crypto, blockchain, and container AI, machine learning enabled backups.
And let's not forget DevSecOps.
If you're buzzword bingo card is full, please submit your answer to us.
To get a free T-shirt.
Yeah, a free T-shirt. That's right.
Part of our bug
I
bounty
was thinking
program.
today, I actually want to make a buzzword bingo card and print up a bunch and take them out to RSA with me and pass them out, just for fun.
It's been done before. Kind of goes
I know
back
it's
to
been
our.
done,
It
but
has been
I
done, but we
haven't
can do
done
it again. Yeah, sure.
No, you should build an app to do it, and the app should actually be malware.
Yes.
And it's connect to every time they click something, just steal a credit card, steal something. No, please don't do that.
Harry has his evil hat. I'm impressed, Harry, with your evil hat. That's great.
No, yeah, you get like maximally pwned as soon as you get bingo.
Right, buzzword bingo.
That's right. Yeah, when you get bingo, then it's extreme
Right.
ponage.
Then it takes all your
Extreme
picks and
ponage.
all of your D
Yes.
picks and posts them on Tumblr.
And scans them for the content of flesh tone before it posts them first.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that
So
a
you-
thing?
Yeah, you can scan pictures for content of flesh tone.
Sounds like you've done this before.
No, it's actually a contrast
Maybe.
detector. So when I was at Mac, well, side little story here, but I was at McAfee.
Oh yeah, don't please do tell. You're on a roll tonight, Harry.
So I was at McAfee through acquisition from SiteAdvisor. We had this, we'd built this technology that crawled the World Wide Web looking for malware. And
Oh wait,
infected
back then it
sites.
was called the World Wide Web. Just
Yeah,
for a young audience
just
out
to-
there. Yeah.
There was this thing
Now
called
it's called the
web,
internet.
the interwebs, and McAfee acquired us. And one of the things they wanted to add, and literally it was called this. I think I could say this was called the nipple detector.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I've heard of this before.
And it was a set of
relevant to my
algorithms,
interests.
right? And it didn't do well on certain things. Like it hated anime, it hated certain types of images that it just couldn't handle. But for your general typical porn skin tone,
Could it
with-
determine gender?
it was a nipple finder. I guess it wasn't a hair detector.
That doesn't necessarily determine gender. Harry.
Okay,
I'm very
I mean,
offended right now.
This is true.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So that's either Paul's into big boobs and hairy chests, or
Maybe both. Who knows? Who are you to judge?
I am
Harry?
not. I'm no one to
Or
judge.
Paul
Actually,
never
you're not
met
one
a
to
nipple
judge.
either.
Knowing
one
you
to
this
judge.
long, you are not one to judge.
No one to judge.
And nobody's judging what kind of nipples you're looking at
I
or
know.
whatever. But anyway, that's
Yeah. In any case, we were back.
you
to
had
the
that
flick.
technology
because you
back
know what?
then.
Right.
Which is,
Because you know what? Who doesn't love nipples?
I mean, they serve a purpose. Maybe not on males, but that's a mystery that we won't unravel on this show for
No.
sure.
I'm not even going to go there. It's way too much trouble.
We just went
Hey,
way
it's
down.
economy
You
of
led us
scale,
down this
right?
rat hole.
I
Harry.
don't even have a safe way out right now. What's my safe
Did
word?
no one warn you not to like?
But I got a safe word. Emacs.
Yeah.
Emacs.
Does Emacs have nipples?
That's his safe word.
Does Emacs have nipples? Can you milk an Emacs?
And you scripted.
Is Emacs an animal? Is that? No, that's an E.
According to
That's an
O'Reilly,
Emu. That's an
Emu.
emu.
According to
Which is
O'Reilly,
different
it
from
is.
emo. I mean,
Right. Emo
yeah,
is
emo
very
is
di-
very
and an emo
different.
detector is actually
an EMAC is a infant emu. They call it an EMAC.
Does it?
He said that with authority. Is that true?
I
Does
well,
it-
No,
Wait.
it's not true.
Does an emu use Emacs?
could be. Larry, let's
moving
talk
along.
about your story number 2, Inside Ubiquiti Discovery Service.
Yeah. So this was a
Since we talked about
fantastic
Ubiquiti, I thought
article
we-
from Rapid 7 that was basically along the lines of, well, yeah, this thing happened with Ubiquiti stuff, and they finally acknowledged that there was a problem, and they decided to patch. But what else? What else can we find? And they went about this by basically acquiring Ubiquiti firmware and obtaining binaries and so forth, and looking at what the traffic and ports were open on Ubiquiti devices, and they found that the Discovery service, their own custom Discovery service, was available on the network that you could interact with in various ways, shapes, and forms. And the binary itself had a bunch of availability for buffer overflows and so forth. So that the
It doesn't
initial
surpri- I mean,
disclosure
go ahead,
was
Larry. I'll let you
limited.
finish. Yeah.
And they found a whole bunch more and actually walked through the entire process of how they were going about doing all of that discovery. I
Now,
thought it was
who's
fascinating.
Ubiquiti fixed these
But as soon as
issues?
they're disclosed, it was probably
Yes,
If it was disclosed from Rapid 7, Harry, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, they probably fix it. So,
absolutely.
again, in the previous segment, we talked about Ubiquiti, and I have looked at the discovery services, and knowing what you know as a security engineer that's been around for a while, is that discovery services are typically really vulnerable, right? And just the nature of the way they work, they want to be like Active Directory, right? They want to be helpful. They want to allow people to discover things, and that's often their downfall. Universal plug and play, as an example, with Ubiquiti. If you've got like an UniFi controller or a cloud key, right? You tell it to go discover access points, and like magically, and it works really well. Magically, it defines all of your access points, whether you're managing them or not, whether you have the password for them. You can adopt it, right? Like if you find an access point, if it hasn't been set up, or it has been set up, but you don't have the credentials, it'll say, yeah, it's there. I know about it, but I can't let you manage it until initial setup has been completed, or you give me the username and password, in which case it'll log in. And it's actually called adopting, and it'll adopt that access point into your management. You need to give it the
scan for 0.0.0.0/0.
Yeah, well, you have to give it the SSH username and password for it if you don't own that device. There are defaults in previous UBNT, and UBNT is the username and password. Is frequently what I try, and sometimes that works if it is in the default state. So it doesn't surprise me that there are vulnerabilities, and hopefully Ubiquiti fixes them, because I like their gear and I like their software. So
nice.
Awesome. Good find, Larry. Any other stories that we would like to cover before we round out the show on Valentine's Day?
What was the DEF CON goes to Washington?
I saw that.
That was Jeff. That was your story.
Jeff.
You had me nervous. I thought it was my story, and I didn't read it. Oh, Jeff, you're on mute.
Jeff's muted.
Jeff.
His VI editor hung.
Oh boy.
Here I am.
His Emacs ate up all his swap space.
Somebody from DEF CON went to D.C. and testified before us. Is it a Senate subcommittee? The Committee on Homeland Security. Defending our democracy, building partnerships to protect America's elections.
Oh,
And
is it? So is this maybe someone from the
voting village.
the election, the voting village?
Jake Brown, co-founder of the DEF CON Voting Machine Hacking Village.
Yep.
So, I think what I read was the first time somebody affiliated with DEF CON has testified in D.C. So kudos.
Very cool.
See, one of the things in there that they talk about as well is the supply chain, and they mention how the parts to these voting machines are created in China, so somebody could compromise them at that point, and then they
Like my firewall.
right, just like
Yeah.
your firewall.
Just like your firewall. Yeah.
and it's kind of interesting where they talk about how they're built in China and could be compromised somewhere in the process, and then be attacked from the Kremlin. It's like, why are we focusing so much on Russia as being the main attack when
It was built in China.
Wouldn't China be just as interested in affecting our democracy as anybody else? I don't know why.
And
That's
probably
not-
more capable.
Well, no, it's the attention.
Actually, no.
Well, it is true. Russia's more capable, but it is the attention span thing. We can only have one big bad wolf at a time.
Right.
So if it's China, it's IP. But if once you talk voting, it has to be Russia, because we can't possibly have two evil doers in the world.
Never mind North Korea. We're not.
Oh yeah, no,
we're not
definitely.
going there.
Unless you're making a movie, then it can be North Korea.
Then it's bad.
They're the only ones who attack Hollywood.
No, but I think a serious answer to Patrick's question is China is more motivated by we're their largest consumer of their goods, so they have a vested interest in keeping our economy going, whereas Russia might be more trying to make a power play. So I think their motivations conceivably are different.
But wouldn't China also be potentially interested in getting a president or a Congress that is more beneficial to them?
Yes.
Yes.
Look,
Good
it could
point.
be it could be something even a lot more subtle than that. Wouldn't they be interested in knowing who's going to win the outcome of elections before they happen? Even if it's only a 12-hour window or something, there's a lot of time you can buy a lot of influence in that time.
Yeah, and
Well, they're in the future, so they got that automatically.
Sweet.
That's a good point, Jeff.
Wow.
they're 12 hours ahead. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, for participating in this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Larry, sorry, take us out.
Overend.